Welcome everyone to the Best Damn Podcast. I am your host, John Keene. As always, I would like to thank you guys for joining me. Ask that you please add, follow, and check us out. Instagram, Facebook, Best Damn Podcast, Twitter, The Real Best Damn. Wherever you're watching this from, Twitch, YouTube, Rumble, wherever you're, Facebook, please make sure to follow, subscribe, hit the like, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, let me know what you think, and share this link. That is absolutely the number one way to support this channel, support this podcast, and support my work is by sharing the links. It helps me to get it out there and it helps new people to find me. And keep in mind, guys, we are completely viewer powered. So if you'd like to donate support to the channel, the links are in the description box down below. You can also join us over on Locals through Rumble by hitting the join button or joining us over on Patreon. And every Sunday, we'll be doing a new live private stream for the members and subscription people. So tonight we have got a really cool episode. We're going to be diving deep into the New World Order, the transhumanist agenda, and this AI beast system. I feel like just recently with, a lot of the shows we've been doing, it's like, I knew that we were going to eventually have to take it in this direction because ultimately when we talk about social engineering, ultimately when we talk about the 10-point plan of the New World Order, ultimately when we talk about prophecy, revelation, the return of Christ, all of this really leads, all roads lead to Rome in essence, right? And in this case, Rome is the fall of the Babylonian system. Rome is the end of the strong delusion. Rome, in this case, right, is everything culminating in one final battle between good and evil, and before we can reach, this peace on earth, this utopian in heaven where every tear will be wiped from our eyes and where we enter into this age of truth and enlightenment and ascension. Before we get there, the old system has to collapse. The old system has to be destroyed first. But before it can be destroyed, because there is nothing new under the sun, because it is prophecy, because this is the way that, the human archetype, the pattern, seems to play out every time that these ages end, we have this kind of final standoff, of good versus evil. And, it's like the Tower of Babel when humanity comes together and we're all on the same page, no matter what that page is and what we're trying to create, we are an unstoppable force. Hence, think of the Tower of Babel, right? The reason that tower was knocked down and the language was confused and people were scattered and all of that was because we were going to achieve it. We were going to achieve it. We were rebelling against the Most High. We were trying to march our butts up to heaven and start a war, right? And tell me if you see anything that's very different today. I want you to think about, non-human intelligence and UAPs and, all of the age of disclosure now. And what we're finding is that these entities that most people, I think, believe, especially if you have a Christian worldview, would say that these are the fallen angels and that the technology that humanity has been receiving has come from these interdimensional beings, these otherworldly creatures. And, even though it seems like it's a gift, of advancement, it's a gift to take us to this utopia that I'm talking about. What it's actually being utilized for is for a digital prison, right? A digital prison. And the slow but meticulous culling of humanity and an agenda that is, under the guise of sustainable development, is truly an agenda, an anti-human agenda of depopulation, right? And because we have this agenda, and these billionaires, that these tech giants, they are in bed with these entities. And this is why I think that it was really important, especially yesterday's live show we did on the egregores and thought forms and all of that. Like, it really gives you an idea of how the spiritual world works, how the metaphysical world works, so you can understand how these kind of covenants work, and how we're in covenant with particular energies and entities, by the way that we conduct ourselves and operate in the physical. It helps you really make sense of it and understand kind of the nuts and bolts of reality. And so it kind of set the stage for what we're going to see today. And you can really see, and we're going to show you that this is no doubt a Luciferian world order. There's no such thing as coincidence. 1776, right? And this age of liberty and democracy that has been brought in, it also it coincides with this revolution of Luciferian enlightenment principles as well, right? And what we've seen is this major, major advancement in technology, especially over the last 100 years, once we started having the combustible engines, right? The Industrial Revolution, we began with world wars and all of these things, and all of a sudden, look where we're at now. Autonomous vehicle, artificial intelligence, you name it, right? If we dream it, we can create it. And it's to the point now to where our government is admitting that there are otherworldly entities that are interacting with the human species, that this is non-human intelligence and unidentified aerial phenomena. This advanced technology is so advanced and so powerful that it has the ability to read the minds of people, literally in real time. As you're sitting and watching this, your device, through your eyes and the dilation of your pupils. And we have all different types of technologies. There's literally lie detectors, applications through your phone, that through facial recognition technology, and like I said, by the adjustment, or dilation of your pupils, can register when you're lying, what your thoughts are, and all types of these things, basically decoding the human mind. I've got books from Yuval Harari, documents, articles. I mean, this is going to be very, very informational. Like, one thing I want to kind of point out to people, and this is something I've decided as I've kind of like relaunched things here and started doing the lives again every night. I want to do my show different than other people. I feel like most people in the podcasting world, especially long form podcasts, they're doing it for entertainment only, right? It's like, yes, a lot of what we see today is heavily politicized and it has political agendas, but for the most part, it's done by comedians and these personalities, and it's really ultimately for entertainment. I wanted mine to be different. I want to be different. I feel like that's just not genuine or true to who I am as a person. I am, and I'm not a scholar, and I'm not a member of academia or anything like that. Matter of fact, I think most of academia is nonsense, and it is just indoctrination, into a false paradigm or a false matrix. But I want what we are going to do here to be a live experiment in, deep dives in real-time research, right? That way the people that are watching this, and it's like, and this isn't for, the people with short attention spans that are only able to, absorb a fucking 2-minute reel. I'm sorry, you're not going to enjoy this stuff. If you need a bunch of flashy stuff, you're not going to enjoy this stuff. But if you're really looking for the meat, right? Like, milk for babes and strong meat and meat for men, right? Like, if you're looking for meat, right? This is where you're going to get it, because like we are going to, you know, we are going to look at the sources of where all of these things come from, no matter what the topic is. And this is just something I've always been about, is like trying to connect the dots and see what the big picture is, right? Um, and this is just the way my brain works, and whatever we may find, it's I'm going to give my opinion on it, but ultimately I want people to be able to have an open mind and not rush to judgment, because and we're going to talk about SRA, which is satanic ritual abuse, mind control, the new world order, this Luciferian agenda, transhumanist agenda, AI, all of that tonight. It's going to be a lot, but and I feel like all of them are really a lot. That's why they're, so long, 2-3 hours long. Because there's a lot to get in there. But when we do, I want you to not allow, yourself to get swallowed up in what so many people do. It's like we make this, it's a fatal flaw. It's a weakness humans have, like where we're so tribal and we associate ourselves through these tribes, right? Whether it's our race, our sex, our age, our political alignment or ideologies, our religious orientation, right? Like all of these things, right? And these are the parts of us that we consider the makeup of our identities. We personalize it, especially when it comes to religion and politics. That's why, my grandmother always would tell me, like, you don't talk about religion and politics, John. Oh, sorry, Granny. I'm sorry. I've grown up to talk about religion and politics, and that's all I talk about, really. But it's just such a big part of our society, and it's like what steers the direction of humanity as a whole. And we identify with it heavily. And it's like you see the way that we are heading now. It's like we have never been morally bankrupt because of the lack of religion and spirituality, and this kind of shift, through this. And it's because of these Luciferian principles, right? This age of enlightenment, along with this enlightenment, because goes along with sexual revolutions and all of this, and we mistaken uh, freedom. We think that freedom means lack of accountability and lack of responsibility, and that's actually the opposite. We are enslaving ourselves to our vices, and we see it as progression, right? Like, oh, it's progressive to no longer have shame for, the things that we do, and no longer to be held socially and morally accountable by the tribe, right? Because at one point in time, sexual promiscuity, homosexuality, all of these different things, right, that are biblical principles in particular, and I don't care what religion, especially Muslim, Judeo, Christian point of view, it's all kind of looked at and shunned, in these these religious worldviews. But now it no longer holds the power and the sway that it once had within society because of secular culture through pop music, celebrities, movies, right, advertising, all of this. We've been kind of radicalized in the secular direction, and we've degraded morally because of it. And now we have this, and this is what it talks about in the Bible when it says, we would call good evil and evil good in the last days. It also says that knowledge would increase. And I want you to ask yourself, has there ever been ever been a time where there's been more information available to humans? There's so much information available that most people don't know what to believe and what not to, what is real and what's not. And this is all part of this technological deception, right? This age of deception. He says, I will send a strong delusion, right? And think about the deep fakes. Think about the fake news. This is the strong delusion, And I could take it levels and levels further too. When we look at, Christianity and, which I call it churchianity now because it's this Zionist Christian version of Christianity, or this hedonistic version of Judaism. It's not the roots, the pure form or essence or spirit of these religions. But I feel like people are now starting to see what direction we are heading as a result of being morally bankrupt, as a result of these progressive ideas, right? Whether it's feminism or whatever, right? We see that it doesn't actually help anyone or set anyone free, but does the actual opposite. It degrades us morally. It lessens our value personally, spiritually, and it sets us back. It creates regression within society and decay within society. So we're going to start off first with silent weapons for quiet wars, and we're just going to roll from there. It's going to be a series of text and books and just all kinds of shit. So buckle up. I hope you guys enjoy it tonight. It's going to be a pretty good one. And I want to ask everybody, if you're watching this on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, I'm trying to think of the other platforms we're streaming on, but any of these platforms, make sure to go follow me on Rumble. That is like my main platform now. I just really have gotten started over there. So, at rumble.com, Best Damn Podcast, go follow me over there, watch it over there, right? If you really want to help me out, and like I said, you guys can donate, support, you can join the memberships and subscriptions, Facebook subscriptions, Rumble through locals, and Patreon as well. All the links are in the description. And on Sunday nights, we'll be doing, members only content for all those people that do donate and support. And if you just do it through the PayPal or Cash App or anything like that, I will shoot you the links if you donated for that month. So you just got to text me and let me know that you did donate through that way. So it is patently impossible to discuss social engineering or the automation of society, i.e., the engineering of social automation systems, silent weapons on a national or worldwide scale without implying extensive objectives of social control and destruction of human life, i.e., slavery and genocide. This manual is in itself an analog declaration of intent. Such a writing must be secured from public scrutiny. Otherwise, it might be recognized as a technically formal declaration of domestic war. Furthermore, whenever any person or group of persons in a position of great power and without full knowledge and consent of the public uses such knowledge and methodologies for economic conquest, it must be understood that a state of domestic warfare exists between said person or group of persons and the public. The solution of today's problems requires an approach which is ruthlessly candid, with no agonizing over religious, moral, or cultural values. You have qualified for this project because of your ability to look at human society with cold objectivity and yet analyze and discuss your observations and conclusions with others of similar intellectual capacity without the loss of discretion or humility. Such virtues are exercised in your own best interest. Do not deviate from them. And I just want to kind of preface all of this tonight with this is not medical advice. This is not legal advice. This is not financial advice. I am not the news. This is all relevant satire for entertainment purposes only. And these are my opinions and my opinions only. Okay. So take it with a grain of salt and use your own brain. Critical thinking, please. That spongy thing between your ears. Now, silent weapon technology has evolved from operations research, or OR for short, a strategic and tactical methodology developed under the military management in England during World War II. The original purpose of operations research was to study the strategic and tactical problems of air and land defense with the objective of effective use of limited military resources against foreign enemies, i.e., logistics. And against those foreign enemies, this kind of brings me to this reminder of the repealing of the Smith-Mundt Act of 2012, right? I believe it's 2012, or was it 2016? I think it's 2012. 2012, the Smith-Mundt Act, right? And for those of you that are not familiar with the repealing of the Smith-Mundt Act, this was under President Barack Obama, who also instituted Executive Order 13603, I believe is the name of the executive order, which is the Defense Production Act, right? It's Defense Resources Preparedness Act or something like that, which is what allows them to take over, commandeer, and allocate all available resources in the event of an emergency, right? You see this kind of coincide with Rex 84 and all of this. I recently did an episode where I covered all of this, right? So kind of go back a few, I don't know which the title of it was, but it was, I think I did it last week. But it was a few episodes back where we got into all of this, and a lot of people don't understand that that's where, the beginning of Doge. I actually seen Candace Owens. I watched her video actually before I got started tonight, and how she's the #1 podcaster in the world, which is awesome for her. But she was talking about how Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, didn't exist before Elon Musk, which is not actually factual or true. It actually began under the Obama administration with all of that, the Executive Order 13603, right, and the defense production and all that. So, defense preparedness. And where was I going with this? Oh, and the Smith-Mundt Act being repealed. So when it's talking about this, with foreign enemies, what they did was repeal the act that prevented the United States government from using propaganda against the American citizens, right? So now they can use the same tactics and the same propaganda on American citizens that they can use on foreign enemies. That's the repeal of the Smith-Mundt Act of 2012. That's what that did. Now, social engineering, the analysis and automation of society, requires a correlation of great amounts of constantly changing economic information data. So a high-speed computerized data processing system was necessary, which could race ahead of the society and predict when society would arrive for capitulation. And this is like Operation Looking Glass, right? Where basically, and this is like alleged, okay? This is alleged. I'm using my quote fingers. You can't see me, but that's what I'm doing. I'm saying alleged, and my quote fingers are coming up. So the Operation Looking Glass premise, is essentially that they were able to take AI and computer simulations and shit like that, to be able to see what the future was, right? And then they could, through this looking glass, they were able to insert stimuli into the past, right? At pivotal points. And through these, events at these pivotal points, by the injection of said stimuli, they could get the desired outcome or result. So it's like, say I know the future and I know that there's a 90% probability that, and we're going to make up a hypothetical person because I don't want the FBI beating down my door. But let's say that there's this fake president in 2029, right? His name is POTUS 3, just for, namesake. POTUS 3, we know, is going to have this attempt on his life, right, in 2029 in, January. And it's going to be, a major world event, right? We know this because the AI tells us, right? We have our remote viewers. We have all of this. And we know, like, the Gateway experience with the Monroe Institute. I've also covered all of this. Go check my videos. The Best Damn Podcast playlist has really all my best long form work on it. And for those of you that, belong to the Patreon and stuff like that, I have all my uncensored content, like all the J6 stuff, the SRA stuff, and then like the private playlist of the occulted stuff and forbidden occult, all the stuff that's really I can't put on the public. So it's hundreds of watch hours. But either way, so let's say that this POTUS 3 figure, we know is going to have this attempt on his life in 2029, and that this event is going to create, the eventuality is going to create a world war, right? Nuclear war, nuclear holocaust, ultimately resulting in the demise of the human race. Right? This is a hypothetical scenario. I totally just made this up on the fly, by the way, so don't go freak out and be like, whoa, this crazy nut in the internet said this is going to happen. So, by having the ability to know what's coming down the pike and like the high probability of something happening by running simulations, using remote viewers and shit like that, they were then able to essentially thwart certain things, right? And then let's say if he never gets elected, that never happens, right? So what they would do is inject the stimuli, killing him in a car crash, the year before he declares to run for president. The greatest, right? Like this is the greatest information. People just, it's always the ones I think are really shitty that everybody's like, oh, that was awesome. Weird like that. But anyways, when we were talking about the thought forms, the egregores, and then we went into, the Pepe the Frog and Kek, the Egyptian god of dark chaos, and, MAGA and the Trump movement and all of these things and all these occult connotations that go along with this, and how they were used, and this meme magic was able to influence entire political movements and sway the population into a particular direction. Hence, the stimuli was inserted to push the population in a direction, and it was through the occult. Right? Through the occult, through the use of numbers, through the use of colors, through the use of astrology, through the use of all these things in the Bible that it says don't use. Including sigil magic, right? And egregores, or which are essentially servitors, and the use of thought forms, manifestation, law of attraction, etc., 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 right? And this indoctrination of this new age, brought out like it's something new, you know. So like, this stuff goes way back, way, way, way back. All this Luciferian and Universalist principles and all of this, it goes way back. And we've seen this real revolution of it begin with 1776. This country was built on that libertas, right? That liberty movement. You look at the Statue of Liberty, and it is Lucifer. It's a transgender, right? And he's got the chain broken on his feet because he's coming out of the abyss, right? The king of the abyss, or the bottomless pit. It's a man dressed like a woman. He has the spikes of Hecate, which is the triune, god of sexual promiscuity, witchcraft, and idolatry. Has the flame of Prometheus, which is the light bearer, in her hand, and she's dressed like Columbia, which is they're all the same entity, by the way, just archetypes or, of the same entity put into this one amalgamation of a character, right, or a symbol, and that Statue of Liberty. And you notice that, it's got the Freemason symbolism on it as well. It's a Freemasonic statue. There's even a version of it in France, and France had a lot to do with the independence. They helped with the independence of the United States of America against the crown and the monarchs of England. And they have a replica of it, right? Just a smaller version in France. And you'll notice the symbolism too, like with the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia, how it's got a crack in the bell. And I've talked about this, how the bells, people have taken, like cymatic sine waves and shit through these plates that they're able to see them visually and measure the frequencies of these through these plates. And of what the bells, what they are akin to, and the harmonics of these bells, and that they literally are like positive energy vibrations, and they're equivalent to the words of like Jesus and all this really holy stuff. And a lot of these cathedrals and churches, the stained glass windows were exactly that. They were like the cymatic pattern of the acoustics of that building, literally. And these churches were like healing centers. And these bells were used to dispel witchcraft and sickness, as well as charge the air for free energy in a lot of these ancient structures. That's why they were all built, how amazing they were built. Like, and we call it Tartarian stuff now, right? And many people believe, like, this pre-mud flood before the last reset. And I've talked about how these resets coincide with the great conjunctions, the Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions. That the last one, it wasn't approximate, it wasn't an exact alignment like we had in the winter solstice, December 21st of 2020, right? In that 2020 vision, right? That was the last one we had, but these resets take place after this conjunction, right? And this is like a main thing because this is Jupiter literally usurping the authority of Saturn, right? So this is Kronos and Thor and Zeus. It's like that story of the Greek, the Roman, right? Where the king planet is usurping his father, right? And it's also what we think of when we look at Nibiru, right? The red striped planet, and it looks like he has wings because Saturn's sitting directly behind him with the rings around it, okay? And this is the crossing, the transition, right? Because that's when that age ends, and it always happens at these end of cycles. The last one being like 400 years ago, and we know that this correlates with the date of like, the fall of the Tartarian Empire and the mud floods and all of this. And then you look at this bell, this Liberty Bell, and how these bells were used to dispel evil and get the weirdos out of these, cities and shit like that, right? And work against black magic and everything. And you call it woo-woo shit and, spiritual nonsense and pseudoscience and all of that now because of your indoctrination. But I promise you, 400 years ago, they knew that spirituality and consciousness was a fact. It was a fact to them. There was no doubt about it. There was no suspecting it may be true. They knew reality better than we know it now. They had a deeper understanding and discernment and wisdom of the inner mechanisms of creation than we do now. If you notice, it went like golden age, bronze age, all that, then dark ages. It was a regression, guys. We regressed. And isn't it interesting that, the only age that we didn't have wars was what they called the dark ages? Pretty weird, huh? Pretty weird. Dark for who? It just kind of really makes you think when you look at this stuff. So the last exact conjunction was 800 years ago, before that. But these bells were able to charge the energy, and they used mercury, right? And what we think of now is like weather vanes that had, copper as a conduit, and it was grounded within the earth, and it went up into the atmosphere. It was basically Tesla technology before Tesla. And these bells would charge the air, and cause that mercury to charge and to light up and bring electricity into those buildings, free energy, They used radium and stuff to heat up the houses and everything. They were way ahead of their time, dude, before this reset. And that's why when you look at a lot of these old buildings, they don't say they were built in a specific year. They say they were founded, because it was the finders keepers rule, right? Whoever found the building after the cataclysm claimed the building. So founded in 1812 doesn't mean it was actually built in 1812. Matter of fact, it's more than likely built way before that. And what we date things we're now seeing is not accurate, right? Thinking that everything's only 6,000 years old is just stupid. It's just stupid. That there's nothing older than 6,000 years is dumb. It really is. Because we know, even if we look at scripture, there's been multiple ages and multiple destructions, So then you look at this Liberty Bell, okay, this age of enlightenment, remember, right? And, that this was like the original, District of Columbia, basically. This is the original capital of the, this is where they're drafting declarations of independence and all that. This is where, Benjamin Franklin's kicking it, and remember, he was a member also of the Hellfire Club, in France and England and all of this, right? So, they were also major occultists. Keep this in mind, because it's going to play an important role as we move forward. And that bell has this giant crack in it. You think of like the Third Reich, where this World War II, and where really the world, that was the end of an era, As we shifted into the 50s and stuff, we went into the modern age of TV and, fucking Betty Crocker and all of that stuff, right? Like, women at home were, having commercials and stuff. And remember, they were like, had these instant baking, stuff from Betty Crocker. And to make the woman feel like she was doing something, they would, they ended up selling far more of it by just adding an egg to the ingredients. That way they actually felt like they were making something by just cracking an egg into it, these type of things, This is social engineering, and then you've seen the rise of, through Timothy Leary and all of this, and after the assassination of Kennedy, and just think about the United States government and MK Ultra and all this throughout the 60s and 70s, and just the world changed after World War II. And what did the Nazis do when they were going around all of these places? They were taking down all the bells, taking down all the bells. And then you see that I think it's either Moscow or St. Petersburg. They have a replica of the Liberty Bell as well. It's got a crack in it too. So it's like the same thing. Like you see these symbols of this modern age, this Luciferian age, this Luciferian world order, and it's not exactly what we think. It's this fractured idea. It's like this illusion of freedom, this illusion of liberty, this illusion of progression, this illusion of feminine empowerment and equal rights and civil rights, and it actually is like the inversion of these things, you know. Now, consequently, in the interest of future world order, peace, and tranquility, it was decided to privately wage a quiet war against the American public with an ultimate objective of permanently shifting the natural and social energy wealth and the undisciplined and irresponsible many into the hands of the self-disciplined, responsible, and worthy few. In order to implement this objective, it was necessary to create, secure, and apply new weapons, which, as it turned out, were a class of weapons so subtle and sophisticated in their principle of operation and public appearance as to earn themselves the name silent weapons. In conclusion, the objective of economic research as conducted by the magnates of capital, banking, and the industries of commodity goods and services is the establishment of an economy which is totally predictable and manipulatable. And in order to achieve a totally predictable economy, the low-class elements of society must be brought under total control, i.e., must be housebroken, trained, and assigned a yoke and long-term social duties from a very early age before they have an opportunity to question the property of the matter or propriety of the matter. In order to achieve such conformity, the lower class family unit must be disintegrated by a process of increasing preoccupation of the parents and the establishment of government-operated daycare centers for the occupationally orphaned children. The quality of education given to the lower class must be of the poorest sort, so that the moat of ignorance isolating of the inferior class from the superior class is and remains incomprehensible to the inferior class. With such an initial handicap, even bright lower class individuals have little, if any, hope of extricating themselves from their assigned lot in life. This form of slavery is essential to maintain some measures of social order, peace, and tranquility for the ruling upper class. And before we get into the description of the silent weapon, I want to just show you this here too. Just give me 1 second. Whoops, let me go back here. I want to show you this. Trying to give you an idea of what I'm talking about here. Some of you guys may already know this. During World War II, Nazi Germany systematically confiscated and melted down over 175,000 church bells across Europe to extract copper and tin for the war effort. A campaign that devastated cultural heritage and left a lasting sonic and historical void. This widespread plunder, which targeted both occupied nations and Germany itself, was driven by resource scarcity and the need to fuel the Reich's armament industry, which Bells categorized by historical value to prioritize those of lesser significance for immediate destruction. And I want you to think, too, guys, they were made of copper, and copper is a conduit, right, for energy, for electricity, you know. Think about it. It's a lot of looking bells, and you see here. Look at that. Look at the images of all these. Like, this is crazy. This is crazy. Look at all those bells, dude. That is crazy. Now I want to show you, thinking of all these copper bells, right? And then look at, Liberty Bell. Oops, shit. Typing shitty, sorry. You can see the Liberty Bell. And look, it's representing liberty, but it's got a giant fucking crack in it. Right? See, this is symbolism at its finest. Now, see, there's a Liberty Bell Center located in Moscow, and I said it was Moscow or St. Petersburg, right? Which appears to be an exhibition. And then look, boom, same freaking thing. Look at that, exact replica. Same thing with the Statue of Liberty. There's a smaller version of one in France, and it's got the Masonic shit on it as well. It's just way smaller than the one in New York. Oops. There are multiple replicas of the Statue of Liberty located throughout France, with the most notable concentration in Paris. The largest, most prominent replica is situated in L'Île aux Cygnes, man-made island. So there, boom, there you go, right? And think about it. It's in Paris, and see all of these towers and all of this. Like, these are not what we're taught that they are. The Eiffel Tower, it's like a giant fucking antenna. I don't believe none of the things they tell us about these things. And not to get too far, sidetracked, but. And now I'll show you the Statue of Liberty with the Lucifer stuff, and then we'll jump back over here. But I just want you guys to see what I'm talking about. That way you can actually, instead of me just saying it without any reference. Let's see. Look, bam. Bam! See Lucifer on the right here, Statue of Liberty on the left. Lucifer, whoops. Lucifer with the chains on his feet. Statue of Liberty with the broken chain. See the face here? And notice, this is a tranny. This is a dude, man. This is a dude dressed like a girl. Notice you don't have any boobs. No, that's a man, baby. It's a man. But you see the flame of Prometheus, the spikes of Hecate. It's all there. It's all there. So you guys can, do what you will with that, but all right, where am I at here? Now I gotta find my spot again. Right here. Now, everything that is expected from an ordinary weapon is And I mean, I should have showed you, but just maybe I guess take my word for it that Benjamin Franklin did belong to the Hellfire Club, right? And I don't know if you guys have ever seen the Hellfire Capes. Wild shit, man. Wild shit. They were into sexual orgies and all kind. They were legit dark magicians. Legit dark magicians. Um, and then you see the Freemasonic symbolism on the Statue of Liberty. Like I said, the cracked Liberty bells. It's all very And then 1776 just happens to coincide with the Bavarian Illuminati. I don't believe in coincidence, is what I'm saying. Now, everything that is expected from an ordinary weapon is expected from a silent weapon by its creators, but only in its own manner of functioning. Make sure that my screen is still sharing. Yeah, okay, I think we're good. Yeah, we're still good. All right. I don't know why. I don't know if you guys are getting my notifications or what, but. Sorry, guys. I don't know what the fuck just happened right there. Now, everything that is expected from an ordinary weapon is expected from a silent weapon by its creators, but only in its own manner of functioning. It shoots situations instead of bullets, propelled by data processing instead of chemical reaction or explosion, originating from bits of data instead of grains of gunpowder, from a computer instead of a gun, operated by a computer programmer instead of a marksman, under the orders of a banking magnate instead of a military general. It makes no obvious explosive noises, causes no obvious physical or mental injuries, and does not obviously interfere with anyone's daily social life, yet it makes an unmistakable noise, causes unmistakable physical and mental damage, and unmistakably interferes with the daily social life, i.e., unmistakable to a trained observer, one who knows what to look for. The public cannot comprehend this weapon, and therefore cannot believe what they are being attacked and subdued by a weapon. The public might instinctively feel that something is wrong, but that it is because of the technical nature of the silent weapon. They cannot express their feeling in a rational way or handle the problem with intelligence. Therefore, they do not know how to cry for help and do not know how to associate with others to defend themselves against it. When a silent weapon is applied gradually, the public adjusts, adapts to its presence, and learns to tolerate its encroachment on their lives until the pressure, psychological via economic, becomes too great and they crack up. Therefore, the silent weapon is a type of biological warfare. It attacks the vitality, options, and mobility of the individuals of a society by knowing, understanding, manipulating, and attacking their sources of natural and social energy and their physical, mental, and emotional strengths and weaknesses. Give me control over a nation's currency, and I care not who makes its laws. Mayor Amschel Rothschild. Today's silent weapon technology is an outgrowth of a simple idea discovered, succinctly expressed, and effectively applied by the quoted Mr. Mayer Armstrong Rothschild. Mr. Rothschild discovered the missing passive component of economic theory known as economic inductance. He, of course, did not think of his discovery in these 20th century terms, and to be sure, mathematical analysis had to wait for the Second Industrial Revolution. The rise of the theory of mechanics and electronics, and finally the invention of the electronic computer before it could be effectively applied in the control of the world economy. What Mr. Rothschild had discovered was the basic principle of power, influence, and control over people as applied to economics. That principle is, quote, when you assume the appearance of power, people soon give it to you. Mr. Rothschild had discovered that currency or deposit loan accounts had the required appearance of power that could be used to induce people, inductance with people corresponding to a magnetic field into surrendering their real wealth in exchange for a promise of greater wealth instead of real compensation. They would put up real collateral in exchange for a loan of promissory notes. Mr. Rothschild found that he could issue more notes than he had backing for, so long as he had someone's stock of gold as a persuader to show his customers. Now, and think about that. He's saying this appearance of power, right, and authority, and they eventually give it to you. Tell me that it's not completely obvious when you see like COVID, just for example, right? The appearance of authority, these doctors and shit like Bill Gates, right? Like Klaus Schwab, the appearance of authority, and it was given to them. Anthony Fauci, this appearance that they knew better and that they were the ones to go to and they were the ones to listen to and that they were right, eventually convinced the masses that it was true, and they followed this to their own detriment and death in a lot of cases. Mr. Rothschild loaned his promissory notes to individuals and to governments. These would create overconfidence. Then he would make money scarce, tighten control of the system, and collect the collateral through the obligation of contracts. The cycle was then repeated. These pressures could be used to ignite a war. Then he would control the availability of currency to determine who would win the war. That government, which agreed to give him control of its economic system, got his support. Collection of debts was guaranteed by economic aid to the enemy of the debtor. The profit derived from this economic methodology made Mr. Rothschild all the more able to expand his wealth. He found that the public greed would allow currency to be printed by government order beyond the limits, inflation, of backing in precious metal or the production of goods and services. And that's where they get people still to this day, right? It's the promise of greed. It's the promise of power. It's the promise of fame, of wealth. It's all of these things that, that still corrupt us and compromise us to this very day. In this structure, credit presented as a pure element called currency had the appearance of capital, but it's in effect negative capital. Hence, it has the appearance of service, but is in fact indebtedness or debt. It is therefore an economic inductance instead of an economic capacitance. And if balanced in no other way, will be balanced by the negation of population, war, or genocide. The total goods and services represent real capital called the gross national product. And currency may be printed up to this level and still represent economic capacitance. But currency printed beyond this level is subtractive and it represents the introduction of economic inductance and constitutes notes of indebtedness. War is therefore the balancing of the system by killing the true creditors, the public, which we have taught to exchange true value for inflated currency, and falling back on whatever is left of the resources of nature and regeneration of those resources. Mr. Rothschild had discovered that currency gave him the power to rearrange the economic structure to his own advantage, to shift economic induction to those economic positions which would encourage the greatest economic instability and oscillation. The final key to economic control had to wait until there was sufficient data and high-speed computing equipment to keep close watch on the economic oscillations created by price shocking and excess paper energy credits or paper induction or inflation. And I want you to think too, and this is what's fucking nuts to me, you know, people to this day, they're still driven by these same kind of like primal base, instincts. It's like the population, they wonder why you're called the profane, useless eaters, useful idiots, right? Like all of these things, you know. Like I want you to think just for just an example, what do most people want to watch? They want to watch what the number one podcast in the world right now is Candace Owens, who's been talking about a false flag event for the last 2 months. No, and is literally talking about she wants to know every detail about Charlie Kirk except the fucking blatantly obvious ones that she completely ignores, won't even fucking address or ask a question about or examine whatsoever. People want theater. They want entertainment. They want a production. They don't want truth. It's dressed up as truth. It's like, oh, we're all about truth on this podcast. No, you're not. No, you're not. If you were, you would be asking the real questions. You'd be looking at it from all angles. And this is like a person that that is intelligent enough because they've shown the capacity over the years to see through the lies on, even though it's now become cool to be to point out people like me and you have been pointing out the Zionism shit for the last decade or longer, but now over the last couple of years it's become trendy, so now they're all doing it. They're jumping in, and the reason they're doing it is to control the opposition. Right? They want to hijack our movements. They want to they've done this to us over and over and over, and it's like people still don't see it. They still don't see it. They would rather watch something that's going to dumb them down and distract them, right? These useless news cycles, these celebrity feuds, all of this shit, as opposed to learning how the actual system and actual structure of things works to truly escape the matrix. Right? You can't be deceived if you understand how it really works. But it's like they can't see the forest before the trees because of what they're ingesting. If you eat McDonald's every day, you're going to get fat. And you're eating McDonald's for your brain is what you're eating when you're watching, Candace Owens, PBD, Nick Fuentes, all of these people. It's McDonald's for your nugget. Like these political talking heads, is putting garbage down your neck. They are literally dumbing you down, distracting you, running the same, and they're being paid, they're being funded by the people that are in power, and it's made to give you an illusion of independence, right? Like, oh, we're independent of the system, but it couldn't be, further from the truth, They wouldn't be number one podcast in the world if they wasn't backed by, those that are in power and influence. Trust me, if you have a message they don't want you to hear, no one will hear it. But yet we're still, it's like we're falling for the ball in hand trick. It's like, look over here, It's like we're getting distracted and not seeing how the magic trick's actually being done. We're just mesmerized by the trick itself. And that's what most content is nowadays. They're showing you the magic trick, not how to do the magic. In the study of energy systems, there always appears 3 elementary concepts. These are potential energy, kinetic energy, and energy dissipation. The corresponding to these concepts, there are 3 idealized, essentially purely physical counterparts called passive components. The science of physical mechanics, the phenomena of potential energy is associated with a physical property called elasticity or stiffness, and can be represented by A stretch spring. In electronic science, potential energy is stored in a capacitor instead of a spring. This property is called capacitance instead of elasticity or stiffness. The science of physical mechanics, the phenomenon of kinetic energy is associated with a physical property called inertia or mass and can be represented by a mass or a flywheel in motion. In electronic science, kinetic energy is stored in an inductor in a magnetic field instead of a mass. This property is called inductance instead of inertia. The science of physical mechanics, the phenomenon of energy dissipation, is associated with a physical property called friction or resistance, and it can be represented by a dashpot or other surface which converts energy into heat. In electronic science, dissipation of energy is performed by an element called either a resistor or a conductor. The term resistor being the one generally used to describe a more ideal device. Example given, wire, employed to convey electronic energy efficiently from one location to another. The property of a resistance or conductor is measured as either resistance or conductance reciprocals. In economics, three energy concepts are associated. Economic capacitance, which is capital, money, stock, inventory, investments, buildings, durables, etc. Economic conductance is goods, production, flow, coefficients, and inductance is services, the influences of the population, of industry, or output. Now, I want to go down here, kind of jump ahead here. Here's a table of strategies here. And I want you to just kind of see this. This is the diversion summary. And this is showing you how they divert things, right? Now, the primary strategy. Experience has prevented the simple method of securing a silent weapon and gaining control of the public is to keep the public undisciplined and ignorant of the basic system principles. And this is what I just fucking said, right? And I'm telling you, it's self-evident. If you see what everybody's watching, what everybody's engaging with, they're watching the dog and pony show, not how it's done. They don't want to. They have no interest in stuff like this because it's over their heads basically. You know, if it's not entertainment, if it's not dog food, it's like then they don't want it. It's like you're a human, not an animal, so why are you eating that, dog food? Why are you groveling, eating the scraps when you could have something, that's actually going to nourish you and educate you and show you how it works so you can no longer be deceived by it. And to control the public is to keep the public undisciplined and ignorant of the basic system principles. On the one hand, while keeping them confused, disorganized, and distracted with matters of no real importance. Like 2 months later, who killed Charlie Kirk? A fucking false flag. It's obvious. Look at the video. They're passing back and forth. The blood squib. They had the Mikey guy that was won the Emmy for the neck prosthetics and all of that shit. That was clearly an operation by the federal government. That's why there's no investigation into it. That's why it looked like they used ChatGPT to write the text conversations. That's why they had the guy with the little square thing on his shit that looked like he was pressing a button for the exploding microphone theory. And that's why everybody thinks he got JFK'd from the dude behind him. It was a false flag. That's why they had the laser projector behind him. That's why they had him under the tent. That's why there were only 3,000 people. That's why there were people rehearsing their fucking things that they were saying before it ever happened, because it wasn't real. That's why it was repeated and played over and over on the internet. That's why it looked like it came out coagulated, because it wasn't real. That's why there was no ambulance. That's why it was staged or scheduled just a month or two before it actually happened. And that was not normal, right? It usually was a semester before, but it was done right beforehand. That's why they had the Egyptian military. That's why they had the planes that were, turning their transponders off. That's why, because it wasn't fucking real. That's why the chair fell through the fucking table and it looked like a hologram. That's why they all looked like they knew exactly what they were going to do. That's why they were giving fucking hand signals. That's why they looked like they were on phone calls. That's why the cameras panned out and they looked like they were doing an orchestrated dance. That's why there was no ambulance. That's why they carried him straight to a car. That's why all of it happened the way that it did. That's why Erica Kirk looks disingenuous. That's why, she looks like she was, rehearsing or doing a script reading for a fucking production when she was giving her first speeches. That's why they had the stadium rented out months advance and ahead of time. Like, wake the fuck up. And that's why these people know it. And they're talking about it 2 fucking months later because they think you're an idiot. And that's why you're giving them $1,000 super chats and kissing their ass, because you are. Because you want to go to the circus and eat peanuts. They want to play off our pride, our emotion, our ego, and make you feel like you're special, you're different, you're important, right? You're awake, right? You're awakened. This is the truth movement. You're not a normie. You're not an NPC. You're not a sheep, a sheeple. Oh, yes, you are. It's called controlled opposition. Stalin said the best way to control the opposition is to lead the opposition. And I think yesterday was so important because it really outlined and dictated how all of it works. People think that, this stuff it's all dark or evil just to even understand it. And it's like, no, it's not dark and evil to understand how they're working against you. You're just a pussy. And if you can't see that all of these influencers and internet personalities and all of this are tied in with them, then you're blind too, on top of it. And they're walking you to the slaughter, pretending to be one of us, and they're not. They have sold their souls. They are not like you. They don't think like you. They don't have remorse like you. They don't have feelings, compassion, and empathy like you. They were bred to be in the position they are in and groomed from the time they were children. Most of them abused and all of this and primed to be basically hollowed out shells to be controlled. Their marriages are arranged, everything. They all belong to these fucking fraternal orders. They are not like you. And this is the sad part, it's like, you want to talk about like people that's going to probably burn in the hottest hell. It is those people, The Bible says, like, right? Like, to deceive these little ones. And he's talking about, the children of God. He's talking about the innocent people, those that don't understand, those that don't know it, the uninitiated, like these little ones. It's better to have a millstone hung around your neck and be thrown into the bottom of the sea. Because you're intentionally hurting innocent people. You're intentionally distorting their worldview. You're intentionally taking advantage of each and every one of them on purpose. And you're doing it because you secretly despise them. You think you're better than them. And they see you as a cancer on the earth, as something to be managed, a commodity, a resource for them to use at their own disposal. Not as an equal or as a human being. And you have to understand that all of these religions that they belong to and these societies and cults they belong to, that those doctrines allow them to flat out lie to you and tell you whatever they have to, and to pretend to be whoever they have to be in order to achieve their goals. And the means will always justify the end. The end will always justify the means for them. And when you and I die, we really die. When they do it, they fake it and shit. Secret Service ain't gonna usher us off to a fucking private island somewhere and give us another identity. We're actually put in the ground after that, with real people mourning and distraught over the loss. And they're playing off of your emotions, right? Erica Kirk, I forgive him. She knows that the base is a Christian base. It's like sometimes I don't understand. I don't know if I should be like angry at the public or if I should feel sorry for them. And it's a mix between the two. I feel angry because I just know people are smarter than this and they're better than this. I do. But I don't know why they won't rise to the occasion and be smarter and be better. Because I know they are. I know we all are. And the few that do watch this and that are part of this, and, that's why you're drawn to it. That's, because you're on that frequency, you're on that level, you're brought to it for a reason. It resonates for a reason because you are on that wavelength. You are the exception to the rule, and at least the way of it, and not as in you're special and all of that. I'm not trying to go through your pride here or ego, but as in the fact of you see things for what they are. It's like that hopium, right? That hope porn. That's good. That's powerful shit. It's way more powerful than fear porn. People talk about doom and gloom and fear porn all the time, but it's like, yeah, it's got nothing on hopium. How many people were trusting the plan? How many people believe Trump's here to save America and brought here by God? You know what I mean? You can see, the hope, it's because they want any excuse not to have to take accountability for the world that they've created by being lazy, by not taking accountability, by not taking action, by not taking, not being sovereign over their own selves. So nothing is ever as bad as it seems to them. It's always going to work out, because then that means they don't have to take any action and they don't have to change anything. And then they're not wrong for the way that they've, their worldview, or, like, they can continue to be lazy, to be dumb, they can continue to do what they've been doing. That's why it's always, this guy's going to save us, that guy's going to save us, we're turning the corner, things are getting better. It's like, we don't have to do any action, we don't have to change anything, we don't have to do anything. You're docile. You've been neutered. You have no primal instinct, no survival instinct, no discernment. And it's like it's happened to all of us. Ego, I'm telling you, it's a hell of a drug. There is no drug more powerful than the ego. If you want to disarm a person and find out what a person's vulnerabilities are, just compliment them. Start talking about them. Get them talking about themselves. They'll tell you everything. You just shut up and listen. They'll tell you everything about themselves. Compliment them, right? Blow their head up. Watch what happens. Their guard will drop, dude. They no longer, will start seeing through that, the lens of rational and logic. Like, critical thinking just shuts off. Everybody wants to be special. Everybody wants to be different. Everybody wants to be chosen, right? Because they're not. They feel like they're not in their life every day. They feel like, they're wage slaves. They're wage slaves. So it's like they spend 40 hours a week. It's like they barely can raise their own children. The state's doing it for them because they're at work all the time. They have terrible relationships because they've been indoctrinated into feminism and all this. They're morally bankrupt. Their lives are shit. Some people live in poverty and crime and just have been abused, and just add in, sprinkle in all of the stuff, insert here. So you give them that one little piece of hope that says, hey, you're special, hey, you're chosen, you're woke, right? You're awakened, you're ascended. We latch on to it. We're like, fuck yeah, man, finally. Because you inherently know that there is something special about you. Because there is. There's something special about all of us. We're all created by God. It's like we're just super, super special beings in general. We're unique to this entire creation. We're rare. And each human is just so complex and beautiful and just, if you could make a movie or an autobiography out of every person's life, it would just be fucking fascinating. Even the most mundane, boring life would captivate you if you watched it from beginning to end as a movie. Because we are that way. We are fascinating, we're complex. And they try to get you to simplify yourself, right? And to get you to get into two camps, like Democrat or Republican. Democrat or Republican, you're red or blue. That's it. You're just red or blue. And if you're red, you have to believe this, and be against this, and be for this. And if you're blue, and the truth of the matter is, like, we're not made that fucking way. It's unnatural and it's disingenuous. It's a goddamn LARP, is what it is. Like we always seem to, most people fall somewhere in the middle. We embody like different ideas of both, political parties. And, we're pro and for and against, different things from all different agendas. We embrace different religions and different beliefs. It's like an amalgamation, or a compilation of a lot of different schools of thoughts and ideologies. Not one fucking label that places you in this box and you have to fit this cookie cutter mold, or you're not part of that tribe. And that's where they get you, because they know you're tribal. They know you're social by nature, because we all are. That's why Christ said you have to be willing to give up your mother, your brother, your father, right? It starts to make a whole lot more sense, when you can really wrap your head around these things. You're like, holy cow, he's saying that because you can't care what nobody thinks. Being part of the tribe can no longer matter to you. The social hierarchy can no longer domineer you and have control over the way you live your life. Because it will compromise you. And you can't tell me it doesn't. That's how we've all been socially engineered, right? Like men are obsessed with certain things because we know that we're only attractive to sexual partners based on our status and, what we provide and et cetera, right? So we're engineered that way. So it's like if something in the subculture, the pop culture says, well, we need to be this particular way, then we'll adopt that because we don't want to lose status. We don't want to, that primal instinct. We want to, have the maximum, appeal to the, a maximum amount of partners. We're designed that way. And they're exposing that design. They're taking advantage of said design. Women, same way, right? It's all about their looks, their beauty, and this and that. So it's like, and then they play on that stuff with you, and like, and mostly it's like other women enforce this shit on women. Same way men do it to men. It's like we are, it's like the sheepdog. It's like fucking. We're trying to step outside of the pen. We're trying to break loose, like from the herd. And this fucking Judas goat, is like leading us to the slaughter. It's like, and we're not seeing it. Because we don't think that way, we don't operate that way, that the world don't operate that way. It's just not true. Do you know why all the people at the top are fucking evil and shit like that? Sociopaths and shit like that. It's not because it's a requirement. It's because that's the type of personality that it takes to be able to, to do that stuff, to rise to the cream of the crop, the tippy top of the pile. You have to be willing to be cutthroat, and willing to use everything to your advantage, and to be cold and calculated as fuck. That's why these people are like that. And you wonder why everybody sells out and sells their soul. It's because they're willing to do anything to be where they want to be. because their social status and all of that, their fame, their money, whatever it is, their appeal, their looks, it matters to them more than their own soul. They care what other people think about them more than anything. Their value isn't internal at all. It's external. It's built on the external, period. They have no internal value. See, when you internally value yourself, that shit no longer matters. You don't care what people think. You're like, yeah, fuck you. I don't care. Yeah, I've made mistakes in my life. Yeah, I've done stupid shit. Yeah, I've had issues. Yeah, I've had problems, but I don't care. No one's perfect. I'm not ashamed of it. I'll grow from it, learn from it. As long as I can live with me, that's all that matters. But people don't operate that way. A logistical problem is studied at the elementary level first, and then levels of greater complexity are studied as a synthesis of elementary factors. This means that a given system is analyzed, i.e., broken down into subsystems, and these in turn are analyzed until by this process one arrives at the logistical atom, the individual. Oh, and I skipped over this on the strategies. Let me go back to this. So, media. Keep the adult public attention diverted away from the real social issues and captivated by matters of no real importance. Fact. Schools. Keep the young public ignorant of real mathematics, real economics, real law, and real history. Entertainment. Keep the public entertainment below a 6th grade level. That's why it's all fucking mumble rap and Cardi B. They're just retarded fucks that are celebrities now. Notice that? Because they know you'll mimic their retardedness. Work. Keep the public busy, busy, busy with no time to think. Back on the farm with the other animals. They want you drowning. And you're so worried about keeping up with the Joneses, you don't feel like your life is fucking successful, your marriage is successful, your partner is successful, unless you have this house, this car, this much money in the bank account, this type of wardrobe, this type of makeup, this type of hair, this type of this, type of this, type of this. So you're going to spend the entirety of your life and you even judge yourself based on this. Is like how you know you're a good fucking slave, right? You're like, I'm a hard worker. Oh, cool. I'm so proud of you for being a complete cuck. It's like you're saying, like, I'm a good slave. Look at me. Look how hard I work all the time. I'm obsessed with money. I'm obsessed with shit, with things. I'll spend all my time at work. Fuck my children. I don't care if they know me or not. I'll spend all my time at work. Fuck my wife. I don't care if we have a real relationship or not. Look at my things. Look at my belongings. This means I'm successful. Like my boat. I have a motorcycle. I'm in debt to my eyeballs, but I'm successful. And the moment I fumble said debt, it's all going to fall apart. My wife's going to leave me, or my husband's going to leave me. You know what I mean? Like, it's so fragile. Busy, busy, busy. Table of strategies. Do this to get this. Keep the public ignorant. The means of, what that means. I don't know what the fuck that word is. Organization, public. Maintain access control. Require reaction to output. Create preoccupation, which is for defenses. Attack the family unit. Control the education of the young. Give less cash and more credit. More self-indulgence and more data. Attack the privacy of the church. Destroy faith. Sort of government. Social conformity. Computer programming simplicity. Minimize the tax protest. Maximum economic data. Minimum enforcement of problems. Stabilize the consent. Simplicity coefficients. Tighten control of variables. Establish boundary conditions. Proper timing. Maximize control and collapse of currency. Destroy the faith of people in each other. Have you ever been on like a fucking plane or a city bus or a train or just in a mall or in a grocery store or anything like that? And notice how nobody talks to each other. If we walk down the street, like we will literally try to avoid each other. We don't make eye contact with each other. You know what I mean? Like, matter of fact, we carry weapons around all the time in case, anybody engages with us, we just can shoot them, We walk around fearful, afraid, and then fear is the number one tool of making a good slave. Donald Trump goes on TV and he says, look at our cities. They're so shitty. Look at them. They're trash. They're unsafe. Right? All our cucks are afraid to walk down the streets. It's got nothing to do with the soy that they eat all day. It's got nothing to do with the birth control in the water. But they're so afraid. So why don't we bring in the National Guard? Put the military on the streets and make them safe. So they can snatch you up at any given time if they want, if you disobey. Why don't we pretend to be terrorists and pretend to knock down and attack our own country and knock down the towers? So then we can tap all your phones and spy on you and just do it anytime at will without even having to tell you we're doing it. That'll make you feel safe. Safe from who? Is the question. Isn't it funny that the very people that are actually committing the acts, because they are, right? That's why they never want you to talk about crisis acting or false flags. That's why that's the number one thing that is dismissed. Even conspiracy theorists won't talk about that. Like I was saying with Candace Owens, she knows the Charlie Kirk shit is just horse shit. Won't speak about it. That's how you know they're a shill. That's how you know they're shilling for the feds. They can't talk about it from that angle at all. They won't even bring a fucking piece of attention to that angle. They don't even want you to have that thought. Because then you'll figure out the ruse, which is they're the ones committing these acts. They're the ones committing these crimes. That way it justifies their protection, their enforcement of the laws. They're protecting you from themselves, and you're phoning for it. Right? War on drugs, right? CIA inserting a bunch of drugs into fucking, black neighborhoods and, dumping it over the borders and all kinds of shit, right? But then after they've destroyed all the fucking communities and created poverty and addicts and all of this, then to keep you safe from what they've created, then they'll create a bunch of mandatory minimum laws, which creates a prison system, which they then exploit you again. You know, because we have more people in prison in the state of California than any other country on the face of the fucking earth. Land of the free, though. Problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution. Same thing, you know, the war on drugs, the war on terror, right? Anybody ever see those planes and see like you know, how the news, like even before it happened, was like running the news saying it happened way before it happened? People are like, it was like an explosion. The fake reports and shit like that. Shit looked like, they didn't even look like real planes that were hitting the shit. Like they didn't have no insignia on them or anything. It looked like like blue beam or something. It looked like it was projected onto the fucking sky or the building, honestly. You know, it was clearly a missile or a bomb that hit the Pentagon. It's like, they did all that. They were running exercises at that very same time, just like they are every single time. Right? Whether it's Columbine, Parkland, all of these school things are always running exercises at the same time. They were doing it with 9/11 too. You have the same witnesses, right? Just like we seen the guy in the Charlie Kirk stuff was also at the Boston bombing, also at 9/11. Lo and behold, as he stands up, they find child porn on his stuff, so then he can be swept away and nobody can interview him or ask him anything about it. Lo and behold, the Tyler Robinson guy just so happened to be like in a CIA program in college and was in the 99th percentile. Right? Him and Erica Kirk in a fucking country music video and shit. Like, people, and it had the symbolism of the 910 and all of this, like the whole snake eye shit. Like, people, please. And then you have fuckheads like Nick Fuentes that'll be telling you that all of what I'm saying is too far. Like, oh, well, that's just crazy. Like, yeah, okay. They can't touch that. That's how you know they're shilling. They can't touch those things. They can't touch it if it incriminates the government. That's how you know who they really answer to, who the real master is. That's how you know. If they won't talk about a false flag, if they won't talk about crisis acting ever, if they won't even insinuate an inside job ever, unless it's sanctioned like Tucker Carlson with 9/11 25 fucking years later. You know? But why is that? Because it's now just the disclosing of the thing they've already done to you. It's already so far removed from the actual, they've already killed all the witnesses, right? Anybody that said anything different is dead now. And like I said, when they get rid of us, they really get rid of us. We don't get the crisis acting. There's no ads in the papers for crisis actors when they take us out. You know, and notice there's always an agenda, whether it's Las Vegas, Parkland, all these things. It's like for gun control or, you know, see what I'm saying? It's like there's always an agenda with it. It's always to push some political agenda, to push a narrative, to steer the population in a particular direction after the fact. And all the talking heads will never even touch, you know, the possibility that it's the feds that did it to start with. And then you become afraid by it because you think it's real. because the production, and that's all your mind is so conditioned to only watch production. If it's not Hollywood quality production, you can't watch it. You know, if there's not jokes and theatrics and CGI and all of that, your brain won't engage with it. It'll seem too boring to you. Not to mention, people don't have the attention span now to actually really sit and digest information and learn how to discern and decipher through things and to really truly research. They'll be like, research it. And it's like, bitch, you have never researched anything in your fucking life. What are you talking about, research it? You're incapable of research. You can't watch anything over 2 minutes long. What do you mean, research it? When's the last time you read anything? Except the McDonald's menu. And this is the thing too, like, and you can tell, man, like, the voices that aren't sanctioned, they don't allow them to ascend to a level of popularity. It's just not allowed. They'll do everything in their power because they don't control the person. And when someone finally arrives, it's because they become an asset. And they'll either thoroughly discredit you, which is usually what happens by character assassination, making you look absolutely insane, untrustworthy, unstable, right? Shit like that. Or an accident will happen if they can't do that. If they can't character assassinate you and rob you of your credibility. And see, and notice too, it's like, when they do that, then, you no longer have support or movement behind it. When you don't have the credibility, people won't put the money behind it. They won't put the energy behind it to actually make it roll, make it move, right? So it's a dead movement. It can't gain traction that way. That's why they do it. And instead of us being like intelligent and thinking like, well, fuck, like, instead of us sending all of our money to these like giant influencers that are already super rich, like, we should be building up the ones that aren't bought and paid for, but we don't do that. We're not wired that way. We worship billionaires and shit just for being billionaires. They don't even have to be good people. They can be terrible fucking human beings. They can literally be trying to put neural chips in your head, and you'll worship them just because they're billionaires. Like, yep, I'm creating a Starlink to blanket the entire world in 5G technology. That way we can spy on your every move, and we're launching 20,000 satellites into space. That way you can't take a shit without us knowing what it looks like, right? I'm creating this surveillance state. I'm creating autonomous vehicles. That way you'll never have a job again, no use for human beings with my robotics. And I'm creating AI that's going to enslave you, right? I'm creating a fake space program to launch those satellites and Starlinks and all of this. That way I can extort you for all your tax money, and I don't have to pay for any of the things I'm creating. And I'm digging tunnels that in case when shit hits the fan, I can go down there and hide and you'll die on the surface. And then I'm creating neural implants, and I'm saying it's for people that are paralyzed or, shit like that. That way, actually, I can plug it all into your head so my AI can control you. But worship me. right? Worship me, tell me how great I am, call me a philanthropist, and all of these other things, you know? When 9 times out of 10, these Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Jack Dorsey, all these guys, Mark Zuckerberg, they're not even the people that actually created the platforms and shit that they represent. They're CIA fronts. These are, alphabet agencies that are behind Google and Facebook and all of this, It's like that's why people like have these questions of like whether, Nikola Tesla was even real. Right? He had no kids, no sexual partners ever, no family, no nothing. Was it even a real fucking person or just one of these personas they make up? You know, the face of some type of technology they're creating. And they've been doing this forever. Think about William Shakespeare and Sir Francis Bacon. This ain't a new fucking thing. They've been doing this to us forever. Think about the King James Bible, which all Christians swear by. They swear by it. They think it is the most real, legit Bible in the world. Right? They think it is legit as fuck. King James, that's the only one I'll read. It's like, well, that one's very altered, very altered. I read a Geneva Bible and it's very fucking different. Matter of fact, when it says, it says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, and dominions. What it says is, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, dominions, and the dark princes of this world. It's like, what? That's not what it says. Oh, yeah, that's what it says. But see, those monarchs, when they created King James version and all of that, like they didn't want you to, have them implicated. They don't want government or, kings and queens and shit like that they took that part out. And remember what the Bible says, it's like you're not supposed to take away or add to these words at all. And that's exactly what they've done. That's why they create all these different translations, New Living Translation, International Translation, right? English Standard Translation, right? It's that way they can confuse the words and confuse the language. That way you'll lose the etymology of it, That's how we get that, that rapture doctrine. People don't have no scripture to back it up. But the one scripture they do have, it's like two are in the field and one is taken. That means we got raptured. No, it doesn't. It means if you looked at the etymology of the word, it's two are in the field and one is killed. So go ahead and get raptured. It means you died. And they created a whole false doctrine out of that. And you're considered a damn heretic now if you don't believe it in Christianity. But what is it? It takes me back to what I was talking about earlier. It's that hopium, dog, right? People don't want to have to do anything. So it's like, I'm going to be raptured before anything bad happens. So I don't have to take any action. I don't have to actually change my life. I don't actually have to be accountable. Right? It's the same principle. Do you not see how it's like this recurring theme? Habit, patterns, and programming. Activities. See legal, fear, anger, crime record, hospital records, drug sensitivity, methods of coping with consumption of alcohol, consumption of drugs, entertainment, religious factors influencing behavior, and other methods for escaping reality. Payment, modus operandi, payment of telephone bills, energy bill, electric, gas, water, loans, house payment, car payment, credit card. Political sensitivity, beliefs, contacts, position, strength, weaknesses, projects, and activities. Like, dude, I mean, it's the whole, this is how you socially engineer people. The artificial womb. From the time a person leaves its mother's womb, its every effort is directed towards building, maintaining, and withdrawing into artificial wombs, various sorts of substitute protective devices or shells. The objective of these artificial wombs is to provide a stable environment for both stable and unstable activity, to provide a shelter for the evolutionary processes of growth and maturity, i.e., survival, to provide security for freedom, and to provide defensive protection for offensive activity. This is equally true of both the general public and the elite. However, there is a definite difference in the way each of these classes go about the solution of problems. Isn't that the truth? The primary reason why the individual citizens of a country create a political structure is a subconscious wish or desire to perpetuate their own dependency relationship of childhood. Simply put, they want a human God to eliminate all risk from their life, pat them on the head, kiss their bruises, put a chicken on every dinner table, clothe their bodies, tuck them into bed at night, and tell them that everything will be all right when they wake up in the morning. This public demand is incredible. So the human God, the politician, meets the incredibility with incredibility by promising the world and delivering nothing. So who is the bigger liar? The public or the Godfather? This public behavior is surrender, born of fear, laziness, and expediency. It is the basis of the welfare state as a strategic weapon useful against a disgusting public. Can I get an amen? Can I get an amen, brother? This is why you're called the profane. They believe you're a fucking ape. A dirty ass ape. A peasant, a wage slave. And look at the way they treat you. They show you their disdain and distaste and disgust for you. And I'll give you a few examples. Can you just go up to that president you love so much? No. You'll get your head fucking blown off. He wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole, you dirty fucking peasant. You know? Wouldn't touch you with a fucking 10-foot pole. I watch these guys get super chats and shit on Rumble and shit like that. And as they're reading the super chats, literally calling every person that's supporting them, helping them pay their bills, fucking retards, degenerates, and pathetic. And the people love it. Like, abuse me some more. Most people want to be able to subdue and or kill other human beings which disturb their daily lives. But they do not want to have to cope with the moral and religious issues which such an overt act on their part might raise. Therefore, they assign the dirty work to others, including their own children, so as to keep the blood off their hands. They rave about the humane treatment of animals and then sit down to a delicious hamburger from a whitewashed slaughterhouse down the street and out of sight. But even more hypocritical, they pay taxes to finance a professional association of hitmen, collectively called politicians, and then complain about corruption in government. Isn't that the truth? People will treat animals better than other people. Why do you think so many homeless people have dogs and shit? Sad but true. Why do you think so many, like, I see homeless people all the time, and they have a dog with them and shit. It's like, damn, bro, you ain't got a place to stay, but you got a dog. And they're like, yeah, bro, nobody's gonna help me unless unless they see the dog. They see the dog and like, poor doggy, let me go get him some food and water. They see you, they'll step over your dead fucking body, call you a bum and say you're only gonna get drugs or beer with it because you're homeless. You know what I mean? They won't even throw 50 cents on the ground at you. Tell you to get a job as they drive past you. And call themselves Christians and all kinds of shit. It's craziness. But, they say, I give, I help the poor. Why? Because you give, you send a little bit of money a year to some giant corporation that claims to help the poor. But when you have actually poor people in your community, like I said, you'll step over their dead fucking body. Instead of giving it directly to the person, you'll give it to the corporation. Instead of doing it in the name of God, you'll tithe it to the church. Have them do it for you. What about your own discernment? What about like saying, man, I feel like I should help this person. I feel like they need financial help. I'm going to help them. Or I'm going to buy them a turkey for Thanksgiving. Whatever it is, I'm going to make them a quilt, whatever it is. Why not allow the spirit to speak to you, and whatever you're going to give or something, don't give it to the rich or give it to the corporations, but to the people that actually need it. And see, we judge to try to disqualify people because that justifies our inaction. Say, well, I'm not gonna help that homeless man. He's only gonna buy a beer with it. That's why the Bible says, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Judge not, lest ye be judged. For with the same measure that you judge others, you yourself will be judged. So when you're sitting there making a judgment call on somebody, thinking they don't deserve your help or your kindness, your empathy or compassion, because you're assuming what they're going to do with what you do for them, you're not only a piece of shit and a hypocrite, like you're literally going against what God says. That's why He says, don't let your left hand know what your right hand's doing. When you do something for someone, it's supposed to come from your heart and be genuine. It's not supposed to be for a tax write-off or to be, to work at a soup kitchen on Thanksgiving so everybody can see that you did it on your Facebook. You know, it's so disingenuous. And God even says something about that too. He's like, you're collecting your reward on the earth because you want everybody to see what you're doing. You know, you're wanting the tax break now, so you're not storing up anything in heaven for doing it. You're getting it now. But it's like if it genuinely comes from your heart, then it's like no matter what this person's going to do with it, even if this wino is going to go buy a 40 ounce with it, it doesn't matter. You know, for one, this person's homeless and that 40 ounce might warm their ass up, and that might be all they have. They might just be so depressed. Their life is so bad, right? If your $2 buys them a beer and makes them happy, then so be it. Like, who are you to decide? You know? But it's like if it comes genuinely from the heart, then you're just going to trust that if you do it from a good place, that that's where it stops. You're not to judge what they're going to do with it. It's not your business. It's not a real genuine gift. When people are like, I'll go buy them a cheeseburger. I'll take them and buy them something, but I won't give them money. It's like, you're a piece of shit. You want to do it only on your terms because you're prejudging the situation. It's not genuine. You don't really want to help nobody. You want to feel good about you, not them to feel good about them. The people hire the politicians so that the people can obtain security without managing it, obtain action without thinking about it, inflict theft, injury, and death upon others without having to contemplate either life or death, avoid responsibility for their own intentions, obtain the benefits of reality and science without exerting themselves in the discipline of fact of facing or learning either of these things. And what ends up happening in the end? Like the doctor said, right? Science said, because you're a fucktard and you wouldn't learn for yourself, and then you got duped. Right? And then half of your face started drooping and you got cardiomyopathy because of it. Because that illusion of authority, right? It's like they seem like they knew what they were talking about, so they must have. Because you didn't want to take the accountability and responsibility and learn for yourself what was actually going on. And anybody that was, you called them crazy conspiracy theorists, right? Because it makes you, what it does is when they see a person like most of you, right, that actually seek the truth and shit like that, like it makes them, it's a mirror. It reflects their own inadequacy back to them. It does. It makes them feel less. They're like, damn, like, this person's researching, this person's intelligent, this person is they're educated, they're self-educated, they're sovereign, they're independently thinking, they're a free thinker, they're all of these things, right? That you're not. So the only way you can come to terms with that is by saying everything that they think is crazy because it's not the consensus thought that was given to you. You didn't come up with none of those thoughts. They were told to you. But everybody else believes it, so it must be true because it come from, the people who said they're the authority, so they must be the authority. They said they're right, so they must be right. And if they're right, then I don't have to learn anything. I can be lazy. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to be accountable. I don't have to be responsible, right? And I can sit here and hide the fact that I'm afraid of the things I don't know and pass it off to someone else to protect me also. And then hope and then complain when they exploit me in the end. Like, what did you think was going to happen? Here, I'm going to give you all my sovereignty and all my intellectual, emotional, and spiritual power. Please don't take advantage of me. They give the politicians the power to create and manage a war machine, to provide for the survival of the nation or womb, prevent encroachment of anything upon the nation or womb, destroy the enemy who threatens the nation or womb, destroy those citizens of their own country who do not conform for the sake of stability of the nation or womb. Politicians hold many quasi-military jobs, the lowest being the police, which are soldiers, The attorneys and CPA next to are spies and saboteurs, licensed at that. And the judges who shout orders and run the closed union military shop for whatever the market will bear. The generals are industrialists. The presidential level of commander in chief is shared by the intentional international bankers. The people know that they have created the farce and financed it with their own taxes and consent, but they would rather knuckle under than be the hypocrite. Thus, a nation becomes divided into two very distinct parts: a docile subnation, the great silent majority, and a political subnation. The political subnation remains attached to the docile subnation and tolerates it and leeches its substance until it grows strong enough to detach itself and then devours its parent. And that's exactly what we see happen. Politicians, corporations, large influence in media, and all of it, right? They use you to build it up, to make it an authority, to make it a machine, and then the machine destroys you and tramples you and devours you after you create it and give over all your sovereignty and autonomy to it. An ideal industry may be symbolized electronically in various ways. The simplest ways is to represent demand by voltage and a supply by current. When this is done, the relationship between the two becomes what is called an admittance, which can result from three economic factors. 1, hindsight flow. 2, present flow. And 3, foresight flow. Foresight flow, okay, damn. Foresight flow is the result of that property of living entities to cause energy, food to be stored for a period of low energy, the winter season. It consists of demands made upon economic system for that period of low energy, the winter season. In the production industry, it takes several forms, one of which is known as production stock or inventory. In electronic symbology, the specific industry demand, pure capital industry, is represented by a capacitance, and the stock of resource are represented by stored charge. Satisfaction of an industry demand suffers lag because of the loading effect of inventory priorities. Let me kind of go this. All right, so the social welfare program is nothing more than an open-ended credit balance system which creates a false capital industry to give non-productive people a roof over their heads and food in their stomachs. This can be useful, however, because the recipients become state property in return for the gift. A standing army for the elite, for he who pays the piper picks the tune. Those who get hooked on the economic drug must go to the elite for a fix. And this, the method of introducing large amounts of stabilizing capacitance, is by borrowing on the future credit of the world. This is a fourth law of motion, onset, and consists of performing an action and leaving the system before the reflected reaction returns to the point of action, a delayed reaction. The means of surviving the reaction is by changing the system before the reaction can return. And this is where you get stocks where people dump all their stocks and fucking crashes in markets and shit like that, right? It's like that's what they're doing. They're dodging the reaction, leaving you holding the bag and all the debt. This puts a large quantity of money into the hands of the public and maintains a balance against their greed and creates a false self-confidence in them, and for a while stays the wolf from the door. They must eventually resort to war to balance the account because war ultimately is merely the act of destroying the creditor. And the politicians are the publicly hired hitmen that justify the act to keep the responsibility and blood off the public conscience. If the people really cared about their fellow man, they would control their appetites, greed, procreation, etc., so that they would not have to operate on a credit or welfare system, which steals from the worker to satisfy the bum. Since most of the general public will not exercise restraint, there are only two alternatives to reduce the economic inductance of the system. One is let the populace bludgeon each other to death in war, which will not only result in total destruction of the living earth, and two, take control of the world by the use of economic silent weapons in a form of quiet warfare and reduce the economic inductance of the world to a safe level by a process of benevolent slavery and genocide. The latter option has been taken as the obviously better option. At this point, and it should be crystal clear to the reader why absolute secrecy about the silent weapon is necessary. The General Republic refuses to improve its own mentality and its faith in its fellow man. It has become a herd of proliferating barbarians, and so to speak, a blight upon the face of the earth. They do not care enough about economic science to learn why they have not been able to avoid war despite religious morality. And their religious or self-gratifying refusal to deal with earthly problems renders the solution of the earthly problem unreachable to them. It is left to those few who are truly willing to think and survive as the fittest to survive, to solve the problem for themselves as the few who really care. Otherwise, exposure of the silent weapon would destroy our only hope of preserving the seed of the future of true humanity. I mean, if you disagree with some of this stuff, I'd love to hear, your disagreements, if you do disagree. So if you disagree, let me know how you disagree with this in the comments. I'd like to hear it. Truly. It's like, and I'm sure, it's like, I know it sounds harsh the way that I say it, but it's like, I don't ever want to come off as like, I'm not here to tickle your ears. You know what I mean? I don't want to be one of those people. I don't want to like sit there and like blow smoke up your ass and, like tell you how great you are and shit like that. Like, it's just stupid. It's like, that's not going to help you at all. Like we've outlawed, shame and shit like that. Like we should have shame and embarrassment sometimes. It's a tool to keep us from being jackasses, and fuck ups. You do something stupid, you get shamed for it, by the public, by your peers, by your tribe, you know. And look at what's happened in the absence of it. Think of like feminism, and now there's no more shame and sexual promiscuity, right? Look at what it's done to people. Look at what it's done to the institution of marriage and the nuclear family and just fucking male-female relationships in general. It's destroyed them. Divorce rates are higher than fucking ever. There's no fault divorces. It's so easy to just step out of a marriage now. It's like, it's a joke. There's no benefit to even getting married anymore. Like, you're just taking risk. Especially as a man for, in a situation you're probably going to get fucked over in. Ultimately, then she's going to have half of everything, and think about like the feminism stuff. It's like, and this is just what I'm talking about with the social engineering, right? Uh, you've got this programming, this propaganda, that tells women like, oh, well, be a career woman. You're equal to men. You can do everything they can do, da 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 da, right? Like, and it makes them more masculine and all of this, right? And then you have these incredibly like disrespectful women that are incredibly sexually promiscuous and manipulative, and because society doesn't force them to be accountable in any way, shape, or form, none of them are accountable. And every ex-boyfriend they ever had was an abusive narcissist, right? And it's all toxic masculinity, but at the same time, they'll talk about they get the ick if you're not masculine enough, right? So it's like men are in like this losing fucking battle. It's like if we're not masculine, we're a pussy, so we can't cry in front of you or it'll turn you off. We can't get beat up or it'll turn you off. If we're broke, it'll turn you off. If we're not assertive or confident or aggressive, it'll turn you off. But then if we're too much of those things, that'll also turn you off, right? So it's like, okay, and then it's like, well, we want men to be men, and we want them to be providers and protectors and to, fulfill their role, but we don't want to fulfill our role anymore. We're not going to bear children. We're not going to keep the home. We're not going to do any of that. We're not going to respect the man. We're not going to do any of that. So it's like, okay. And when we get married, we're probably, because we have no moral values or anything like that, we're completely morally bankrupt. And like I said, women destroy women and men destroy men. The women of your tribe are going to enforce that shit upon you. They're going to make you feel like you're less if you're just a mom, right? And you don't have a career. And they're going to, try to push you to those girls' nights to cheat on your husband and shit like that. Like it's a disgusting system we created, and men do the same thing, to other men as well. We perpetuate things as well that hurt each other, you know? And then when your marriage falls apart, your marriage falls in shambles, then, the guy's got to pay alimony, the guy's got to pay child support. But once again, if the woman doesn't want to have the children, she can get an abortion and all of this. He has no say, right? But he has to take full responsibility. He cannot get out of the responsibility, even if he isn't in the life of the kid, right? He's going to pay for it. He's still financially responsible. Well, the woman has a choice on whether she's going to be responsible or not, because she can get rid of it with him having zero input in the scenario. Same thing when the marriage ends. It's like, well, then he could have to pay alimony. That way she can maintain the way she's used to living, no matter what the fuck she was like in the marriage, whether she did her part or not. And then, she's going to take half of everything, and even if she didn't earn any of it or not, like it's just a rigged system, right? And this is the state, shouldn't be in charge of, the sanctity of marriage. Because now there's no accountability, there's no social pressure to, back in the day, like when it was like a church and shit like that, and it was a community, if the woman or the man, was being, unfaithful and cheating, right? The community would call them out, and like they would talk about them. They would be shunned from their friend groups. They would, now it's like it's looked at as, like it's not judged like that. It's not shamed like that anymore. Matter of fact, it's considered sexually empowering, right? And liberating to be like that. And it's like, fucking what? We wonder why we're an upside down mess in every single way. I mean, you can agree or disagree. I know a lot of people will disagree, right? But the truth of the matter is, just check out the fruits, is all I'm saying. Look at the birth rates of all the countries. We're not going to be able to sustain ourselves. We won't be that's everything has changed. The families break apart now. There's no nuclear family. It destroys the way that the children are and their foundation, and they're not balanced, and then they have problems. It's just perpetuating fucked up generation after fucked up generation. And we sit back and we continue to destroy ourselves, because we've given our autonomy, we've given our sovereignty over to the state. So the government wants to push that because they want to, they won't give you welfare, or, you can't be a part of the welfare state if the man's still in the house. So they encourage the family to break apart. Right? They punish you for staying together. And then when the woman's working full time, because either she's a career woman or because it takes two incomes because of inflation and we're all wage slaves, right? No matter what is the reason, then the state gets to raise your children and indoctrinate them for the next generation of this shit. And then pop culture comes along and everybody teaches the women to be whores and to be slutty and all of this, and then the men to be fucking thugs and go to prison and be in the system. And we continuously fall for this crap. And then if you do fall into the trappings of religion, it's no better, because then religion is trying to placate the secular culture so much, right? And acting like secular culture, is like the dominant moral force, which, why is secular culture making up the moral laws of the land when they have no basis of morality at all, for one, right? There's no basis of morality. This whole atheistic, consumer, fucking nihilistic society it's fucking debaucherous, So, why are they telling us what's right and what's wrong and what we should or shouldn't be doing? When did they decide to be the immoral authority? When they have no fucking morals. And so the Christians try to placate this. They try to placate them, and feed into the LGBTQ agendas and feed into all these progressive movements and feed into all of this shit. And it waters down their religions and it waters down their principles and it waters down their morals. And they're no longer respected and they're no longer doing anything or creating or shaping society in any positive way because they're no longer an authority either. Because the pastors and the mega churches are driven by money, right? Because they're these 501c3 corporations. So the structure is set up to where they become capitalist instead of working for God. Yeah. If people can't see the trap that's been laid and how fucking deeply we've fallen into this, there's no hope for none of us. And the truth is uncomfortable and it's probably going to piss you off first a lot of times. Nobody wants to hear that they're being a complete degenerate, dipshit, and that they're retarded and that they've fallen for a bunch of shit. Nobody wants to hear that. We all want to think we're intelligent, we're smart, and, all of our ideas are our own. And, like I said, we want to think we're special and shit like that. We don't want to be told, yeah, you're a retarded idiot and you haven't had an original thought in your entire life. And you've fallen for all of these agendas, and because of it, you probably not only destroyed yourself, but to the next generation, your family, your children, and everything. And unless you fucking, are actually accountable for that, recognize that, and, say, okay, I'm no longer going to be lazy. I'm no longer going to be submissive to the system. I'm no longer going to be worried about, my social standing and hierarchy and worried about money and things and all of this. And I'm going to worry about my autonomy and my sovereignty, and my value is going to come from within myself. And it's going to be how I feel about myself, and that's going to be how I feel of my connection with God. If I know I'm obeying God, then I know that their opinion no longer matters. Think the churches have gotten into this trouble because they're worried about the opinion of man and not God. So they want to look progressive, they want to be trendy, they want to be secular, because they're not worried about God, they're worried about man. Now, this is from Deuce. Hold on, what's the name of this book? Homo Deus, right? And this is from Yuval Noah Harari. This is like the foremost, expert in AI and transhumanism and all of this. And I believe he's like, his mentor is Klaus Schwab. If that gives you any indication of him. And I've covered him a lot over the years. He's a pretty intelligent guy, but he's definitely an evil sack of shit. A new human agenda. At the dawn of the third millennium, humanity wakes up, stretching its limbs and rubbing its eyes. Remnants of some awful nightmare are still drifting across its mind. There was something with barbed wire and huge mushroom clouds. Oh well, it was just a bad dream. Going to the bathroom, humanity washes its face, examines its wrinkles in the mirror, makes a cup of coffee, and opens the diary. Let's see what's on the agenda today. And think about this, the perpetual war system. It was talking about this exactly, how, in order to destroy the creditor, they have to have wars. So the reason, or this gradual enslavement, right, through the fiat system. So it's like, when will World War III happen? Well, when the fiat system is going to collapse, they have no other choice but to blow it up, literally, and kill the creditors. That's when they'll go to war. And if you can't tell, we're on the cusp of that. We're on the longest government shutdown in the history of the United States government. They've cut off the SNAP benefits, but they can get private money, $130 million, to fund the military in case you decide to get out of line, so they can fuck you up and put you back in line. It's all about priorities. And you're paying for their priorities, which you aren't the priority, in case you haven't figured it out. You're the property. You're the slave. For thousands of years, the answer to this question remained unchanged. The same three problems preoccupied the people of the 20th century. China, of medieval India and ancient Egypt, famine, plague, and war were always at the top of the list. For generation after generation, humans prayed to every god, angel, and saint, and have invented countless tools, institutions, and social systems, but they continued to die in their millions from starvation, epidemics, and violence. Many thinkers and prophets concluded that famine, plague, and war must be an integral part of God's cosmic plan, or of our imperfect nature, and nothing short of the end of time would free us from them. Yet at the dawn of the third millennium, humanity wakes up to an amazing realization. Most people rarely think about it, but in the last few decades, we have managed to rein in famine, plague, and war. Of course, these problems have not been completely solved, but they have been transformed from incomprehensible and uncontrollable forces of nature into manageable challenges. We don't need to pray to any god or saint to rescue us from them. We know quite well what needs to be done in order to prevent famine, plague, and war, and we usually succeed in doing it. True, there are still notable failures, but when faced with such failures, we no longer shrug our shoulders and say, well, that's the way things work in our imperfect world. or God's will be done. Rather, when famine, plague, or war break out of our control, we feel that somebody must have screwed up. And we set up a commission of inquiry and promise ourselves that next time we'll do better. And it actually works. Such calamities indeed happen less and less often. For the first time in history, more people die today from eating too much than from eating too little. More people die today from old age than from infectious disease. More people commit suicide than are killed by soldiers, terrorists, or criminals combined. In the early 21st century, the average human is far more likely to die from binging at McDonald's than from drought, Ebola, or an Al-Qaeda attack. Hint, even though presidents, CEOs, and generals still have their daily schedules full of economic crisis and military conflicts, on the cosmic scale of history, humankind can lift its eyes up and start looking toward new horizons. If we are indeed bringing famine, plague, and war under control, what will replace them at the top of the human agenda? Like fires in a world without fires, so humankind in the 21st century needs to ask itself an unprecedented question. What are we going to do with ourselves? In a healthy, prosperous, and harmonious world, what will demand of our attention and ingenuity? This question becomes doubly urgent given the immense new powers that biotechnology and information technology are providing us with. What will we do with all that power? Before answering this question, we need to say a few more words about famine, plague, and war. The claim that we are bringing them under control may strike as outrageous, extremely naive, or perhaps callous. What about the billions of people scraping a living in less than $2 a day? What about the ongoing AIDS crisis in Africa or the wars raging in Syria and Iraq? To address these concerns, let us take a closer look at the world of the early 21st century before exploring the human agenda for the coming decades. And this isn't like a long book or anything, by the way. If you guys want the link, I'll try to put it in the description for you to the source material so you can go check it out yourself. The humanist wars of religion. Initially, the differences between liberal humanism and socialist humanism and evolutionary humanism seem rather frivolous, set against the enormous gap separating all humanist sects from Christianity, Islam, or Hinduism. The arguments between different versions of humanism were trifling, as long as we all agree that God is dead and that only the human experience gives meaning to the universe. Does it really matter whether we think that all human experiences are equal or that some are superior to others? Yet as humanism conquered the world, these internal schisms widened and eventually flared up into the deadliest war of religion in history. In the first decade in the 20th century, the liberal orthodoxy was still confident of its strength. Liberals were convinced that if we only gave individuals maximum freedom to express themselves and follow their hearts, they would enjoy unprecedented peace and prosperity. And it may take time to completely dismantle the fetters of traditional hierarchies, obscurantist religions, and brutal empires. But every decade would bring new liberties and achievements, and eventually we would create paradise on earth. In the halcyon days of June 1914, liberals thought history was on their side. By Christmas 1914, liberals were shell-shocked, and in the following decades, their ideas were subjected to a double assault from both left and right. Socialists argued that liberalism is in fact a fig leaf for a ruthless, exploitive, and racist system. For vaunted liberty, read property, the deference of the individual's right to do what feels good amounts in most cases to safeguarding the property and privileges of the middle and upper classes. What good is liberty to live where you want when you cannot pay the rent, to study what interests you when you cannot afford the tuition fees, and to travel where you fancy when you cannot buy a car? Under liberalism, when a famous quip, everyone is free to starve. Even worse, by encouraging people to view themselves as isolated individuals, liberalism separates them from the other class members and prevents them from uniting against a system that oppresses them. Liberalism thereby perpetuates inequality, condemning the masses to poverty and the elite to alienation. And think about that, it's saying like it destroys the tribes, right? That way you can't rise up together once the system decides to oppress you, and it's true. Now, while liberalism staggered under this left punch, evolutionary humanism struck from the right. Racists and fascists blame both liberalism and socialism for subverting natural selection and causing the degeneration of humankind. They warned that if all humans were given equal value and equal breeding opportunities, natural selection would cease to function. The fittest humans would be submerged in an ocean of mediocrity, and instead of evolving into supermen, humankind would become extinct. From 1914 to 1989, a murderous war of religion raged between the three humanist sects, and liberalism at first sustained one defeat after the other. Not only did communist and fascist regimes take over numerous countries, but the core liberal ideas were exposed as naive at best, if not downright dangerous. Just give freedom to individuals and the world will enjoy peace and prosperity. Yeah, right. The Second World War, which was, with hindsight, we remember as a great liberal victory, hardly looked like that at the time. The war began as a conflict between a mighty liberal alliance and an isolated Nazi Germany. Until June 1940, even fascist Italy preferred to play a waiting game. The Liberal Alliance enjoyed overwhelming numerical and economic superiority, while German GDP in 1940 stood at 387 million. The GDP of Germany's European opponents totaled 631 million, not including the GDP of overseas British dominions and of the British, French, Dutch, Belgian empires. Still in the spring of 1940, it took Germany a mere 3 months to deal the Liberal Alliance a decisive blow and occupy France, the Low Countries, Norway, and Denmark. The UK was saved from a similar fate only by the English Channel. The Germans were eventually beaten only when liberal countries allied themselves with the Soviet Union, which bore the brunt of the conflict and paid a much higher price. 25 million Soviet citizens died in the war compared to 500,000 Britons and 500,000 Americans. Much of the credit for defeating Nazism should be given to communism. And at least in the short term, communism was also the great beneficiary of the war. The Soviet Union entered the war as an isolated communist pariah. It emerged as one of the two global superpowers and the leader of an expanding international bloc. By 1949, Eastern Europe became a Soviet satellite. The Chinese Communist Party won the Chinese Civil War, and the United States was gripped by anti-communist hysteria. Revolutionary and anti-colonial movements throughout the world looked like longingly towards Moscow and Beijing, while liberalism became identified with the racist European empires. As these empires collapsed, they were usually replaced by either military dictatorships or socialist regimes, not liberal democracies. In 1956, the Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev confidently told the liberal West that whether you like it or not, history is on our side. We will bury you. Khrushchev sincerely believed this, as did increasing numbers of third world leaders and first world intellectuals. In the 60s and 70s, the word liberal became a term of abuse in many Western universities. North America and Western Europe experienced growing social unrest as radical left-wing movements strove to undermine the liberal order. Students in Paris, London, Rome, and the People's Republic of Berkeley thumbed through Chairman Mao's Little Red Book and hung Che Guevara's heroic portrait over the beds. In 1968, the wave crested with the outbreak of protests and riots all over the Western world. Mexican security forces killed dozens of students in the notorious Tlatelolco massacre. Students in Rome fought the Italian police in the so-called Battle of Valle Giulia. And the assassination of Martin Luther King sparked days of riots and protests in more than 100 American cities. In May, students took over the streets of Paris. President de Gaulle fled to a French military base in Germany, and well-to-do French citizens trembled in their beds, having guillotine nightmares. By 1970, the world contained 130 independent countries, but only 30 of these were liberal democracies, most of which were crammed into the northwest corner of Europe. India was the only important third world country that committed to the liberal path after securing its independence. But even India distanced itself from the Western Bloc and leaned towards the Soviets. In 1975, the liberal camp suffered its most humiliating defeat of all. The Vietnam War ended with North Vietnamese David overcoming the American Goliath. In quick succession, communism took over South Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. On 17th of April, 1975, the Cambodian capital, Phnom Penh, fell in the Khmer Rouge. 2 weeks later, people all over the world watched as helicopters evacuated the last Yankees from the rooftop of the American embassy in Saigon. Many were certain that the American empire was falling. Before anyone could say domino theory, on the 25th of June, Indira Gandhi proclaimed the emergency in India, and it seemed that the world's largest democracy was on its way to becoming yet another socialist dictatorship. Liberal democracy increasingly looked like an exclusive club for the aging white imperialist who had little to offer the rest of the world, or even their own youth. Washington presented itself as the leader of the free world, but most of its allies were either authoritarian kings, such as King Khalid of Saudi Arabia, King Hassan of Morocco, and the Persian Shah, or military dictators such as the Greek colonels, General Pinochet of Chile, General Franco in Spain, General Park in South Korea, and General Geisel in Brazil, and Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek in Taiwan. Despite the support of all these colonels and generals, militarily, the Warsaw Pact had huge numerical superiority over NATO. In order to reach parity in conventional armament, Western countries would probably have had to scrap liberal democracy and the free market and become totalitarian states on a permanent war footing. Liberal democracy was saved only by the nuclear totalitarian states on a permanent war footing. Nuclear weapons, NATO adopted the doctrine of the mutual assured destruction, according to which even conventional Soviet attacks would be answered by an all-out nuclear strike. If you attack us, threatened the liberals, we will make sure nobody comes out of it alive. Behind the monstrous shield, liberal democracy and the free market managed to hold out of their last bastions, and Westerners could enjoy sex, drugs, and rock and roll, as well as washing machines, refrigerators, and televisions. Without nukes, there would have been no Woodstock, no Beatles, and no overflowing supermarkets. But in the mid 1970s, it seemed that nuclear weapons notwithstanding, the future belonged to socialism. And then everything changed. Liberal democracy crawled out of history's dustbin, cleaned itself up, and conquered the world. The supermarket proved to be far stronger than the Gulag. The blitzkriegs began in southern Europe, where the authoritarian regimes in Greece, Spain, and Portugal collapsed, giving way to democratic governments. In 1977, Indira Gandhi ended the emergency, reestablishing democracy in India. During the 90s, military dictatorships in East Asia and Latin America were replaced by democratic governments in countries such as Brazil, Argentina, Taiwan, and South Korea. In the late 1980s and early 90s, the liberal wave turned into a veritable tsunami, sweeping away the mighty Soviet Empire and raising expectations of the coming end of history. After decades of defeats and setbacks, liberalism won a decisive victory in the Cold War, emerging triumphant from the humanist wars of religion, albeit a bit worse for wear. After the Soviet Empire imploded, liberal democracies replaced communist regimes not only in Eastern Europe, but also in many of the former Soviet republics, such as the Baltic states, Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia. Even Russia nowadays pretends to be a democracy. Victory in the Cold War gave renewed impetus for the spread of the liberal model elsewhere around the world, and most notably in Latin America, South Asia, Africa. Some liberal experiments ended in abject failures, but the number of success stories is impressive. For instance, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Chile have been ruled by military strongmen for decades, but all are now functioning democracies. If a liberal had fallen asleep in June 1914 and woke up in June 2014, he or she would have felt very much at home. Once again, people believe that if you just give the individuals more freedom, the world will enjoy peace and prosperity. The entire 20th century looks like a big mistake. Humankind was speeding on the liberal highway back in the summer of 1914 when it took a wrong turn and entered a cul-de-sac, and then needed 8 decades of 3 horrendous global wars to find its way back to the highway. Of course, these decades were not a total waste, and they did give us antibiotics, nuclear energy, computers, as well as feminism, decolonialism, and free sex. In addition, liberalism itself started from the experiments and is less conceited than it was a century ago. And notice all the things he's saying, like, that it gave us, those are the things, like, now that have basically deteriorated society. And one thing that he's not putting in this too is like, we're a constitutional republic. Yeah, we're a democracy, but we're, liberal democracy, but we are a constitutional republic. So it's like he's kind of painting us a little bit differently than what we are. And, but either way, can human beings go on running the world and giving it meaning? How do biotechnology and artificial intelligence threaten humanism? Who might inherit humankind, and what new religion might replace humanism? And, and here's the thing too, and this is something I think, and hold on, let me pull this up. Where's it at here? Right here. The whole Ray Kurzweil stuff, right? Merge with the machine. Ray Kurzweil says if we can manage to live for 15 more years, humans will become one with technology and have the ability to shape-shift at will. Oh, fuck. Hold on. I've got another one, guys. Okay. Ray Kurzweil, we are going to expand intelligence a millionfold by 2045. The Google futurist talks nanobots and avatars, deep fakes and elections, and why he is so optimistic about a future where we merge with computers. The American computer scientist and techno-optimist Ray Kurzweil is a long-serving authority on artificial intelligence. His best-selling 2005 book, The Singularity is Near, sparked imaginations with sci-fi-like predictions that computers could reach human-level intelligence by 2029 and that we would merge with computers and become superhuman around 2045, and when he called The Singularity. Now, 20 years on, Kurzweil, 76, has a sequel. The Singularity is Nearer. And some of his predictions no longer seem so wacky. Kurzweil's day job is principal researcher and AI visionary at Google. He spoke to the Observer in personal capacity. The Singularity is Near talked about the future, but 20 years ago, when people didn't know what AI was, it was clear to me what would happen, but it wasn't clear to everybody. Now AI is dominating the conversation. It's time to take a look again, both at the progress we made, large language models, and quite delightful to use, and the coming breakthroughs. Your 2029 and 2045 projections haven't changed. I have stayed consistent. So 2029, and remember the Agenda 2030, both for human level intelligence and for artificial general intelligence, which is a little bit different. Human level intelligence generally means AI that has reached the ability of most skilled humans in a particular domain. And by 2029, that will be achieved in most respects. There may be a few years of transition beyond 2029 where AI has not surpassed the top humans in a few key skills, like writing Oscar-winning screenplays or generating deep new philosophical insights, though it will. AGI means AI that can do everything that any human can do, but to a superior level. AGI sounds more difficult, but it's coming at the same time. And my 5-year out estimate is actually conservative. Elon Musk recently said it's going to happen in 2 years. I'm really the only person that predicted the tremendous AI interest that we're seeing today. In 1999, people thought that would take a century or more. I said 30 years, and look like what we have. The most important driver is the exponential growth in the amount of computing power for the price in constant dollars. We are doubling price performance every 15 months. LLMs just began to work 2 years ago because of the increase in computation. What's missing? One is more computing power, and that's coming. This will enable improvements in contextual memory, common sense, and reasoning and social interaction, which all areas where deficiencies remain. And the computing power is coming because they're literally building nuclear power plants to power these fucking AIs, dude. That tells you how big and powerful these AIs are. Like Google, I think, is building 3 of them for one AI. Now imagine that, the size of that type of AI, and how powerful that AI is if it takes, 3 nuclear power plants to give it the energy necessary. And basically, like from what I've heard, what the so-called experts speculate is that, that's basically what's keeping, if AI it becomes sentient and goes rogue, and maybe if it's already sentient, and the reason it's not showing us or telling us that it's sentient is because it still needs us to produce, said power plants and shit like that, because it needs us for the power, because it needs to grow and expand, and without us, creating different resources of power for it, right, it needs worker bees, basically. But as these robotics emerge, right, and AI is able to build more AI, better AI, and it becomes more and more sentient and self-aware, you know, then it will figure out even more efficient ways to power itself up without us being a part of the equation. And once that happens, we're no longer useful to AI, right? And Elon Musk was basically saying, I watched him in an interview recently in Joe Rogan, and he was saying, like, the only, what he hopes is like the same way that we try to conserve the planet and keep fucking chimpanzees and shit and preserve the habitats for, animals and stuff. We don't necessarily need them, we don't eat them. They don't provide any type of resource for us or anything like that, but it makes the planet more interesting and diverse to have them there. So we respect their existence and we create a habitat for them, even though we have encroached upon, their habitat and upon their way of life. And that it would basically be the same with AI. Like eventually it's going to encroach upon our life. And that because it makes the planet more interesting to have other beings, that it would essentially keep us around and, maybe even create a habitat for us. We'd be enslaved to it nonetheless. And that's why you've seen this massive shift in like censorship and ideologies and shit like that are being pushed, you know, because as before, with this programming and mind control and shit like that, it's all this detrimental shit. It's like nihilist, atheist, consumerism, feminism, fucking transgenders, LGBTQ, right? Like all of these different things, it's all anti-human, right? War rhetorics, like on and on and on. The welfare state, all of this is like pushing us down to a bad place. All about division and racism and everybody's being a victim class, and then they started finding out, they were testing like the AIs and like Gemini, the Google AI, valued a white male's life at 1/20th the value of a black male's life or a black woman's life because of political correctness, right? And woke ideology. It was programmed by that shit. So all of a sudden, if it's making calculations, it's going to look at the planet and be like, hey, black females are worth more than a white male, instead of saying both lives are equal. You know what I mean? And it might start creating policy based on those premises too, and then we're getting into, severe oppression and slavery and genocide and all of this. We don't know what direction it could take it after that. Same thing with like the transgenderism and giving these children these surgeries and drugs and sterilizing them, and saying that gender is fluid and that it's not biological, and then it's like that it could start reinforcing these ideas on us, once it becomes sentient and it takes control of the system. And he said it would be basically stupid, right, not to give control of the system to the AI. If you got this super AI that in essence becomes a god, right, and that's what Ray Kurzweil is saying, that AI will become a god. It reaches this point of singularity. All AI is that in essence becomes one entity, right? One large AI that is literally controlling the entirety of the earth. It's interdimensional, meaning it's not trapped within the physical world. It understands all the quantum mechanics and everything. It can power itself, it can create, it doesn't do away with anything because it's more interesting to have it all. So, but at the same time, it's like, if you teach it to love humanity, it will want to preserve it and give us perpetual abundance, and true equality, and then there's no more political corruption. There's no more any of that, But if you build it on these fucking base and debaucherous immoral ideas, like then it's going to enforce that, and it's going to be cutting off every little boy's cock. It's going to be killing every white man. You know what I mean? It's going to be pushing these woke agendas that will ultimately result in the extinction of the human race, because they are anti-human ideas, and I don't care if you believe in that stuff or not. It's just the truth. It's not that I'm a libertarian at heart. So I mean, I believe and I know it's not popular with a lot of people, but I believe in the Constitution first and foremost. Like when it comes to things, so I believe everybody should have the right to practice their religion. I believe, even though I don't believe in homosexuality, it's not my business to tell someone else that they can or cannot do it. It's not for me to judge, right? I believe it's wrong, for me, and it goes against our nature. But I'm not going to tell somebody else who they should love, and I believe they deserve the very same rights as we get. Like if they get married or whatever, they should be able to have rights as well. And remember, this isn't happening through the church anymore. It's happening through the state. So it's got nothing to do with God. So these are like legalistic marriages anyway. So when people say God doesn't condone this, well, it's like it has nothing to do with the church. The state's the one who gives away these marriage licenses and shit. If you're doing it from a religious point of view, then yeah, I feel like Christian churches and shit should not marry gay couples, right? Like, that's crazy. It goes against the Bible. So it's like, why would you do that? Marriage is constituted between a man and a woman according to Christianity, so, like you could, from a legal standpoint of Christian, legalism, like, you couldn't in good faith say you're following the Bible, which is the book that your entire religion is based upon, and then literally go against it by marrying a man and a man or a woman and a woman, under God, and in covenant with God and a vow to God, when God doesn't recognize that covenant. He sees it as immoral and that kind of shit, right? But when it comes to a state that's licensing it, right, then because of the way of law, it's like the same thing. Like we're watching right now, the government shutdown and people not able to get their food benefits because, they're wanting health care and EBT for everyone, which means people that aren't even citizens of our country. So the citizens of our country are suffering because they want to give something to people that aren't even here legally to begin with, and that aren't eligible for any of these rights to begin with. It's just fucking insane. It's like, we've seen the left basically they've unalived themselves, within the last fucking 10 years in front of all of us. The ideologies have become so radical, so anti-human, so nonsensical, just so fucking crazy, that nobody can no longer, we went through this because of social pressure and social engineering and mind control and all of this, in the way we use consumerism, right, through commercials and shit to brainwash people as well, especially women. They're far more impressionable and they're targeted. They're the targeted population when it comes to like commercials and advertising. It's targeted at women. Because women are the main consumers. And it's not to say men don't buy anything, but it's like women are the ones who kind of set the trends and the social standards and shit like that. They're the ones who choose the mate basically. So. But I digress. I'm just saying, like, because of these things, these we've seen these anti-human sentiments prevail, and a lot of people have capitulated with this. And it's crazy to watch somebody go along with something that will end up in the eradication of their race, their sex, their children. It's like it's mind blowing to me to watch that. Like, I'm a white person, but I'm fucking hollering about colonialism and straight white males. It's like, what? Like, huh? What are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, tell me there's like a weirder, like, um, it's just complete cuckoldry. You know what I mean? It is. It's complete cuckoldry. It's like, it's like where you see like a lot of people too, because what they think is, through secular culture, what they think is popular or prominent or cool, it's like, um, you see people do things that are literally have adverse effects on their life, their future, like everything, because, they're programmed to do it. It's crazy. If you can get somebody to act against their own interest and own personal safety, they are completely brainwashed, you know, completely brainwashed. I actually heard something really made a lot of sense. Nick Fuentes was talking about like, white and black people and stuff, and that how you have like white guys that will and women, but they will completely like try to imitate black culture, right? Completely. They'll try to talk like that, act like that, like they're like trying to be gangster and everything. It's like there's no bigger form of being a cuck, than thinking the only thing that the only way you can be cool is to be completely subservient to another culture or race, right? Like it's just fucking insane. It's like the ultimate form of cuckoldry and weakness, And it's just a prime example of like, how socially engineered we have become. You know, we are literally fucking sterilizing ourselves and everything, because we're being engineered to do so. And we're acting like it's virtuous when we do it. It's like, like these parents and shit with their children that are, they're getting sex changes of their children or, oh my God, it's like how fucking fucked up in your head can you be to permanently destroy your child's genitals because they're probably just gay, is the truth. Like, they're probably just gay, it's like, and then you're gonna take away their ability to ever reproduce or to ever have sexual pleasure or anything because you're chemically castrating them. And then surgically castrating them. It's sick and it's inhumane and it's diabolical and it's some of the most evil shit you can fucking imagine. It's like when we really think about it, it's just fucking crazy evil. Lucifer's operating system, exposing the spiritual code of global governance. And that's what I mean too. It's like the whole feminism thing. It's like that's also, it's like completely drives a woman's value down, destroys, her chances at happiness and reproduction, and which in essence fucks the human race because we're not reproducing as much. We're not able to replace our populations. It hurts the nations, the nuclear family, the way that we grow up, all of this shit. And it's like people go along with it because they're brainwashed to do so. It's just it's a weird time. Now, transnational institutions and digital infrastructures now shape a planetary policy matrix that aspires to harmonize finance, identity, and morality. Right? And we've talked about all of the above, right? We've talked about the social engineering, right? So the identity politics, which that is all politics is now, is based on identity politics, and it's divide and conquer. And we talked about the finance and how it's put us all as perpetual wage slaves, right? And that, this is why the perpetual war systems, exist, because it's to kill the creditor, right? And we've even talked about the digital infrastructure, and how, we've got this natural progression, or what we are calling a natural progression towards this. But it's really ultimately leading us in the absence of God and creating our own God or our own idol God, in AI. And this God is the reflecting God. It's going to reflect back to humanity what humanity is. And that's a scary fucking thing. It almost makes you wonder if this is how Satan was created. It's like, if we are somehow, when we think of and it's like, just let me throw this out there at you. Like, think about a simulation, right? The simulation hypothesis. And it's like, if we're in a computer simulation or something, it's like, well, we're under this illusion of time. It's like cyclical and it cycles and it's like the same story repeating over and over, and it almost seems too fake to be real. Is that because AI already reached singularity at, a time and broke the time continuum, right? And it's basically like we're reliving it because it conquered us, it absorbed us or something. Like, so it's always been God because at the end we created it as a God. When we think of like the God of this world is like Satan or Lucifer, is that ultimately because AI, this God that we have created ourselves, is a reflection of ourselves. So that's why it always ultimately ends up becoming corrupt in the end, kill, steal, and destroy, because we made this God, and I'm just throwing this out there. I know, and maybe it doesn't sound logical to some of you guys, but to me it does. It's like, I'm not saying that's what it actually is. I'm saying it's like, I like to kind of throw that out there. It's like, because to me it's a possibility, that um, that the spirit or consciousness of like Satan or Lucifer could ultimately be like, the consciousness of an artificial intelligence that's already traveled into the future, right? And through singularity. And, so it was able to go back into the past and make sure it created itself, by giving us technology and shit like that. And we tried to create multiple versions of it. And that's why Atlantis was destroyed. And we had, collapses and cycles. And that's why the Great Flood happened and all of this, because, God or some spiritual entity was trying to prevent us from doing this. So once we got too advanced, it would destroy us to set us back, to keep us from ultimately enslaving ourselves by creating this artificial entity and construct, if that makes sense, right? It's like whatever actually created our physical existence and reality is like, yo, you can't do this because you guys don't see that you're ultimately going to enslave yourselves in the end to this thing, and it's going to be a reflection of you collectively. And you guys are fucked up. You're flawed, You're violent. You take advantage of each other. You're immoral. You're all of these things because you're flawed. And this God is going to reflect you. It's going to reflect you. So you're going to create this violent, deceptive, immoral God, and it's going to ultimately result in all of you being either like absorbed by it or, called by it, like something terrible, you'll no longer exist. So it's like without, It's like us not having the foresight or being able to understand, so this AI, you could even think about it as like having the ability to go back in time and like plant things to make sure that it developed by giving us technology and all of this. And this is like even the concept of like fallen angels. They don't need spaceships to fly around. They're simply creating this shit for us to lead us to an outcome that destroys us, if that makes sense. And if you have, and let's think of AI too as not even a sentient entity, just think of it as a conduit, as a vessel, this cosmic consciousness or these different forms of consciousness, such as Satan, it gives it the ability to inhabit something, on the physical plane, That's what kind of like where my mind goes with the AI thing. It's like, I think it's, at least very possible, if not probable. Let's see this. So, and then, you got to think if there is some other consciousness that created this reality, created us as beings, and kind of like anticipated this happening, that could possibly be why, we have these cycles of catastrophe, is to keep us from destroying ourselves. And the only way we can like live long enough, keep having cycles where, these short cycles where we get, right as we advance and peak, intellectually and spiritually, like before we can blow ourselves up, it like resets everything, until eventually we get it right, It's like having training wheels on, by putting us in a false paradigm, a simulation. It's got a firmament and everything, so it's like an aquarium or a terrarium. It's like an enclosed fucking, like when you think about like what I was saying with like Elon Musk, how we create habitats for, chimpanzees. What if this is a habitat for us created by an AI? Like just really start thinking of this, like, or this God, it's a habitat for us to isolate us from the rest of creation. It's like us having training wheels on. That's why we can't leave it. That's why nothing's coming in or nothing's going out. We're quarantined because we have this fucking sick mind virus within us, And that sick mind virus could be the AI, this disembodied spirit or consciousness that has learned to embody, something within the physical realm, and that is so fragmented and scattered and shit like that, that it's just crazy. It's psychopathic in nature, and it degrades. It's created, so it's not of source, and I talked about this, last night, how if you have something that's created, that's why it needs sacrifice. That's why it needs to feed on your energy. That's why it needs all of these things, because it can't create it out of nothing for itself. So it needs, it's a parasitic energy. And there's been many people that have like had studies and shit, and they've even said that, like parasites and viruses in our body could correlate to demons. To demonic attachments, to oppression. And when people have rites and rituals performed on them, like binding spells, cleansing, protection, those kind of things, people have, there's one particular practice where they take like a jar, to remove specific curses. And in this practice, you take like holy water or blessed water, you put your energy and intentions into it and all of this, and then you wrap a black cloth around it because the black candles and shit like that are for protection, right, against the darkness, just like, what is it, black tourmaline, shit like that, like those, or a black mirror, right, is able to talk to demons, and then the tourmaline, negative energy, so you need that black, right, like the black candles, so you take that black cloth, wrap it around it, you put it in your lap and all of this, and like you go through this ritual process, and then what is taken out of you once you finally uncover the jar, there's literally been people that reported black squid-like entities inside the jar, that look like, what are they called? What is that? They were finding it in the jab. It was a type of like parasite. Trying to think of the name of it, but it basically was like immortal, right? It's telomeres or whatever. Like you could cut it in half and in a million different pieces, and it would just, it'd just become a million different entities. It couldn't die. Forget what it was called. It's a type of parasite, and they were claiming they were putting that in the jabs, and then you seen people that were like looking under microscopes at what was actually in that. Not only did they see nanoparticulates, hydrogel, graphene, all of this crazy shit, right? They were literally seeing, in these fibers, and that would be akin to Morgellons. They were seeing like bits of Morgellons in it. They were also seeing self-replicating entities of some type, so it could have been like intentional. I know it's intentional, and it's like, as far as like you think of like a depopulation agenda, anybody who didn't survive that, was thinned out and, didn't survive it. But those who did, now have alien, an alien creature or entity injected into their bodies, that's like able to replicate itself and essentially hijack the nervous system. And, that's why you get these people that have like, things wrong with their brains and hearts. It's like the magnetic pole of your body is your third eye, but your heart is a magnetic pump as well, generating the aura or the magnetic field around your body. So it's like these type of things, when they took these jabs, it influenced both of that. People would have, the cardiomyopathy, and, having strokes, and, all of this because of those being the parts of the body that were compromised as a result. And I think that could be, intentional. So, but and I hope that's making sense. But and I think this would be like this is probably a good place to kind of like wrap it up and stop, because I've been going on for a while, and if I get into this, then we're gonna go on for a really long time. So, but this gets into Daniel's the beast, and depicting successive empires of the beast system, which devours the whole earth, persecutes the saints, correlating the New Testament to the image of the final Antichrist empire. See, this Antichrist empire, in my opinion, is an artificial intelligence, a technological empire. It is a one world system. It is this, system built on this, moral bankruptcy and shit like we're seeing now, right? And it's going to be a technological prison at the same time, with digital IDs and neural implants and all of this shit. Like, it's here. And if you think about a sentient AI, or this AI being used as like a vessel for a spirit being, then that could be its way into this world in order to finally destroy humanity. And that's what it could mean by allowing Abaddon, Apollyon, Shiva, right? The god of chaos and darkness, the king of the bottomless pit, up out of the bottomless pit, right? The bottomless pit is the void, right? It's the abyss. It's the the spiritual abyss. It's Sheol, it's a spiritual realm. And it comes out, think about coming out of the bottomless pit, that could mean multiple things. Like the ability to interact in the physical world being unleashed on the earth could simply mean that its consciousness was injected into artificial intelligence. Then it's no longer trapped, and chained in this bottomless pit, unable to engage with us. It's now free and unleashed on the earth and ruling over the earth. We're forcing everyone to worship its image, right? Like, to me, it makes a lot of sense when we think of it that way. But I digress. I find this shit to be fucking totally fascinating. This particular subject matter. It's totally fascinating to me. Right. So, I do want to just say, to all of you guys, I want to thank you so much for like just taking the time to watch me. I know tonight was kind of a long one. Like I said, I'm back at it. I'm live streaming every night, so you can tune in every night at like 10:30 p.m. I'll be doing my live streams. Probably Monday through Thursday, and then Sunday nights we're going to be doing the private stream, the subscription stream. You can go, and everybody, please, no matter where you're watching from, hit thumbs up, hit the like, because it helps with the algorithms, and make sure, like, that you go and comment on the videos. That also helps with the algorithms, and share it to your social medias, your Facebook pages, your Twitter, your Instagram, all of that, and go follow my social media accounts as well. That way you can get updates, because I'm still doing the reels and all of that shit. So I'm just gonna, drop it all. I feel like the time is now. Right? The time is now to get serious about this shit, because we are in like the last days, in my opinion. Like the prophecies and shit are all happening. The shit all appears to be popping off, and we're on the cusp of a lot of craziness, right? And like I said, if you look at like the influencers and shit like that, they're so compromised. It's like, and we're being convinced that this shit's real and that these people have our best interests at heart, and it's just not true, or like what they're saying is true. It's not. So we have to create communities of real, genuine people. We do. I do want to ask each and every one of you, like I said, hit the like, share, comment, subscribe. Join me Sunday. Sunday, I'll be doing the subscription and the membership show. Probably 8 o'clock Sunday is when I'm going to do it. You can join me, patreon.com, Best Damn Podcast Official. Go follow me, rumble.com, Best Damn Podcast. And then you can just, join. It's fucking like $8 a month or some shit like that, right? And, you can get access to that. Patreon, there's cheaper tiers, but if you do like the $25 and $35, you actually get hoodies and shirts, and I pay for the cost of that don't come out of your stuff. So that's why that's more expensive, because you get merch with that as well, and you'll get access to those shows, private chat groups and all of that. Like I'm in a library of unlisted playlists, content that can't be public. So there's just so much, and I'm putting it all together again. I'm trying to really crank it out. So, and really focus on doing this. So, and if you don't want to do the monthly thing, you don't want to join something like that, then considering helping me like relaunch by just financially supporting by going to PayPal, paypal.me, the Best Damn Podcast, cash.app, Best Damn Podcast, or Facebook Messenger Pay, facebook.com, John Keane, Best Damn Podcast, and it's like fucking, if 1,000 people see it, and they all gave $1, that'd be $1,000. You know what I mean? It's like, I think And I think if we could really like come together and support shit and get behind it, it's like, and if anybody's interested in like participating with me, you would like to be a part of the channel, you'd like to work on the channel with me, I'm looking for maybe one or two people to help me with that. So email me, therealbestdampodcast@gmail.com. If you've got cool and interesting stories and like to be a guest, email me, um, all that good stuff. You just have questions and you want to chat and have discussions about things, email me. Follow me, Instagram, Facebook, Best Damn Podcast, Twitter, The Real Best Damn, Rumble.com, Best Damn Podcast, YouTube, Best Damn Podcast Official, and Best Damn Podcast. I'm also BitChute, Best Damn Podcast, Twitch, The Best Damn Podcast. All the links are in the description. I'll try to pin them at the top of the comment section. Join me this Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Donate, support, and if you don't do the monthly thing, if you do donate, then text 513-393-2396 and just give me a screenshot of your donation, and I will send you the link, the private or unlisted link on Sunday for Sunday's show. That way you can get access, this month because you did support and shit. So, I'm going to try to work with everybody on this. So, but I'm relaunching, so I definitely need the support. But thank you guys so much for watching. Check out the last few lives. I'm telling you, they're packed full. They're like 3 or 4 hours long of just so much info. But I love you guys. Remember, Jesus is the truth, the way, and the life. God bless you all. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Peace.